Hello there, and welcome to my channel. I'm so glad you found your way here today. Tonight we drift into something quietly astonishing, the invisible art every person carries, without ever studying for it. Long before language, before words had names, humans were already reading each other. A glance across a room, a pause before an answer, a shift in breath that meant something had changed. Tonight's story is about that ancient wordless fluency, how a face can say what a sentence cannot, how silence can carry more meaning than speech, and how you, without even trying, have been fluent in this language since before you could remember learning it. There is no need to follow closely or hold on to every detail. Let your mind loosen. Let your body settle into whatever is holding you right now. And before we begin, if you enjoy what I share here, please leave a like and hit subscribe. It's how others find their way to this little corner too. Now let's begin. Somewhere in the space of a single held breath before a single word has formed, the brain has already made a judgment about the face in front of it. This happens before thought arrives in any form you could describe out loud. Researchers who study perception have found that facial recognition circuits fire with a speed that outpaces almost every other kind of visual processing the brain performs. A face is not read the way a sentence is read letter by letter building toward meaning. It arrives whole instantly the way a color arrives or a sound. Long before you decide whether to trust someone, some quieter part of you has already begun deciding for you. This is not a flaw in human design. It is closer to a gift inherited from ancestors who needed to know in an instant whether an approaching stranger meant safety or danger. There was no time then for careful deliberation. There was only the face and the speed of an answer. That same wiring still lives in you tonight, resting quietly beneath the surface of every glance you exchange with another person. You do not need to think about reading a face. You simply do it the way your lungs simply breathe. It is one of the oldest habits your body owns, older than most of the words you know, older than most of the stories you have been told about yourself. And it will keep happening long after tonight. In every room you enter, in every eye that meets yours, quietly, faithfully, without ever once asking your permission. A newborn cannot lift its own head, cannot focus clearly beyond a short distance, and yet, within minutes of arriving in the world, something remarkable is already happening. Studies with very young infants have shown a clear preference for face-like arrangements of shapes over scrambled or random patterns, even when the infant has never once seen a human face before. 2 dots above a line will draw a newborn's gaze more reliably than any other configuration researchers have tested. This suggests something extraordinary. The tendency to read faces may not be entirely learned. It may arrive already partly built, waiting only for the world to give it something to practice on. Within days, that same infant begins distinguishing their mother's face from a stranger's. Within weeks, they begin responding differently to a smile than to a blank expression. None of this is taught in any formal sense. No one sits an infant down to explain what a face means. And yet the recognition deepens daily. Quietly, the way roots deepen before anyone notices, the tree has grown taller. You once did this too, in your very first days, reaching for faces before you could reach for anything else with your hands. That instinct never fully left. It only grew quieter, folding itself into the background of every relationship you have built since. Still active, still watching, still finding comfort in the particular arrangement of eyes and mouth that tells you somewhere underneath all, you're grown up thinking that you are looking at someone, not something. Picture a face, appearing for the briefest possible moment, gone again, almost before it registers consciously. In laboratory studies, participants shown unfamiliar faces for mere fractions of a second, still formed confident judgments about how trustworthy those faces seemed. Extending the viewing time afterward barely changed the initial impression. The verdict, it turns out, had already been reached. There is something both humbling and strange about this. So much of trust, something we like to imagine as earned slowly through experience, seems to begin with a snap judgment made before any experience has occurred at all. The width of a jawline, the tilt of eyebrows, the resting shape of a mouth, small architectural details of a face largely outside anyone's control, quietly shape a first impression before a single word has been exchanged. This does not mean those first impressions are always accurate. They frequently are not. But the speed of it reveals something about how deeply embedded this reading ability is, how far below conscious reasoning it operates. It runs on its own clock, faster than deliberate thought, faster than manners, faster than the careful, polite version of yourself that greets people at the door. Somewhere inside you right now, a quiet evaluator has already met thousands of faces this way across your lifetime, forming impressions in fractions of a second, mostly without your awareness, mostly without asking anything of you at all. Except the simple act of looking. You have likely called it a gut feeling. Perhaps you have called it instinct or a hunch you could not quite explain. What researchers who study expertise have found is that much of what people call intuition is in fact an accumulation of pattern recognition built quietly over years of exposure, operating too quickly for conscious awareness to catch up. With it, a seasoned nurse senses that a patient is declining before the numbers on any monitor confirm it. A firefighter feels the pull to leave a room seconds before it collapses, unable to say exactly why. Their brains have absorbed thousands of small cues across years of practice, cues too fast and too numerous to name, individually yet fully present in the decision being made. This is not magic, though it can feel that way from the outside. It is recognition compressed by repetition into something that feels instant. You carry this too, in whatever rooms you have spent your life moving through. Perhaps it is a colleague's tone that tells you a meeting will go badly before it starts. Perhaps it is the particular quiet of a loved one that tells you today is not an easy day for them. That knowing did not arrive from nowhere. It arrived from years of paying quiet attention so consistently that the attention itself became invisible to you, folded into something that simply feels like knowing. Trust that knowing gently tonight, the way you would trust something earned rather than something magical, because in truth it was earned one small, unnoticed moment at a time. It would be reasonable to assume that reading people depends heavily on sight, on the visible architecture of a face. And yet research into blind individuals, particularly those blind from birth, tells a quieter and more surprising story. Many blind people read vocal emotion with an accuracy that matches or even exceeds sighted individuals, picking up on subtle shifts in pitch, pace, and breath that sighted listeners often miss, entirely distracted as they are by the visual information competing for their attention. Without the face to lean on, the ear becomes remarkably precise. Tiny fluctuations in tone begin to carry the full weight of what once might have been split between eyes and ears. This suggests something important about reading people as a whole. It was never only about the face. Emotion leaks into voice, into rhythm, into the smallest catch of breath before a difficult sentence. Somewhere in your own life you have likely done this too without noticing. A friend's voice on the phone can tell you they are not truly fine even when their words insist otherwise. A parent's voice through a closed door can tell you they are worried long before you see their face. The ability was never limited to sight alone. It was always distributed more widely across the senses than most people assume, waiting quietly in the voice, ready to be heard by anyone willing to listen closely enough. Sighted or not, in the dark or in the light, there is a particular kind of story that keeps appearing in research on identical twins, separated at birth and reunited decades later as adults. Despite growing up in entirely different homes, different countries, sometimes different languages, many of these twins describe an immediate, almost eerie sense of familiarity upon meeting, rooted partly in how naturally they seem to read one another's expressions. Shared genetics appear to shape not just facial structure, but certain patterns in how emotion moves across that structure. The particular way a brow lifts, the particular rhythm of a smile forming. Two strangers who share a birthday and little else can still recognize something achingly familiar in the shape of the other's laughter. This suggests that reading people, while shaped enormously by experience, also rests on a quieter genetic foundation, present before any relationship has had the chance to build itself. It is a strange kind of intimacy, arriving without history behind it. And in a smaller, gentler way, most people experience an echo of this. Meeting someone who reminds you without explanation of someone else you have loved. Feeling instantly at ease with a stranger whose expressions move in familiar, comfortable ways. That sense of ease is not accidental. It is the same ancient reading ability, responding to family, to lineage, to whatever shape of feature and gesture your own body was taught very early to call safe. You carry that recognition quietly within you, ready to respond the moment it meets its match. There is a particular kind of discipline practiced around card tables that reveals, almost by accident, just how much ordinary people read without realizing it. Professional poker players spend years learning to suppress the very signals most people broadcast, without a second thought, a held breath before a large bet, a flicker of the eyes toward a strong hand, a subtle stiffening of the shoulders. When nervous, the fact that so much training is required to hide these signals says something important. It means the signals are there constantly in nearly everyone most of the time. What card players call a tell is simply an unfiltered piece of honesty leaking out through the body while the mouth stays composed. Even highly trained players are rarely able to erase every signal completely. Something almost always slips through a small physical honesty the conscious mind cannot fully police. This is worth sitting with for a moment. So much of what makes people readable is not deception on their part, nor unusual skill on the reader's part. It is simply the difficulty of keeping a whole body silent while only the mouth speaks. You have likely felt this yourself, the strange effort of trying to seem calm while your hands betray something else entirely. That effort is not a personal failing. It is a universal one, shared by every person who has ever tried to hide an emotion, while their body quietly insisted on telling the truth anyway, in its own small involuntary language. There are two muscles primarily responsible for a smile. One lifts the corners of the mouth, and this one can be summoned voluntarily, almost on command, whenever politeness requires it. The other tightens gently around the eyes, and this one resists conscious control far more stubbornly. A genuine smile, the kind that arrives with real feeling behind it, tends to recruit both muscles together, producing the familiar soft crinkling at the outer corners of the eyes. A performed smile, however polished, often activates the mouth alone, leaving the eyes comparatively still. This difference has been studied closely enough to earn its own name in research circles tied to the muscle group involved, though the label matters far less than the underlying truth it points toward. Feeling changes the whole face, not just the part most easily controlled. This is part of why some smiles feel warm from across a room, and others, technically identical in shape, feel oddly hollow. The eyes are telling a different story than the mouth is telling. You have likely sensed this distinction countless times, without ever naming it, feeling instinctively more at ease around someone whose whole face seems to soften, rather than merely rearrange itself. That instinct is not imagination. It is a quiet, accurate reading of a genuine physiological difference. One your own face performs as well without instruction, whenever warmth moves through you honestly, rather than being offered out of mere obligation. Among the many animals humans have lived alongside across thousands of years, dogs stand out for an unusual and specific talent. Research comparing domesticated species has found that dogs are remarkably skilled at reading human facial expressions, distinguishing a happy face from an angry one, with notable accuracy even in still photographs of people they have never met. This ability appears to have been shaped by an extraordinarily long shared history, tens of thousands of years of living alongside humans, watching human faces for cues about safety, food, and mood. Dogs orient toward the left side of a human face more than the right, when reading emotion, mirroring a pattern found in how humans read each other. A small detail suggesting the skill may share deeper neurological roots across species. A dog does not need language to know that a raised voice means something has shifted. It reads the face, the posture, the tension in a room, often before the person themselves has fully registered their own mood. Anyone who has lived closely with a dog has likely felt this uncanny accuracy firsthand, the way a dog seems to know without being told that today is a harder day than most. That knowing is not simple obedience. It is a quiet, attentive kind of literacy built across a shared history longer than most human relationships offered back each day, in the soft, steady watching of a face it has learned patiently to read. It is tempting to imagine reading people as a single, unified talent, something a person either has or does not have. Research into social cognition suggests something more layered than that. Reading another person actually draws on dozens of smaller, semi-independent abilities working together, recognizing facial expressions, interpreting tone of voice, reading posture, tracking eye movement, sensing timing and pause, understanding context, and remembering personal history, among many others. A person can be skilled in one of these areas while struggling in another. Someone might read tone of voice beautifully while missing subtle facial cues entirely, or notice posture instantly while remaining oblivious to sarcasm in speech. This is part of why reading people feels so effortless for some, and so effortful for others, and why the same person can feel wildly perceptive in one relationship and strangely lost in another. It is not one skill failing or succeeding. It is many skills, each with its own strengths, its own blind spots, its own quiet learning curve. This is, in a strange way, reassuring. No one reads every person perfectly, because no one possesses every one of these smaller skills in equal measure. What matters far more than perfection is attention, the willingness to keep noticing, to keep gathering small pieces of information about the people who matter most. You have likely built, without ever naming it, your own particular combination of these skills, sharpened quietly by every relationship you have ever paid attention to. Deep within the brain's motor and premotor regions exist a particular class of neurons that behave in a curious and specific way. They activate not only when a person performs an action themselves, but also when they simply watch someone else perform that same action. Researchers first identified these cells in studies involving movement as simple as reaching for an object, and the finding has since expanded into a broader understanding of how humans might intuitively grasp what another person intends to do sometimes before that person consciously decides. This system offers one possible explanation for why watching someone wince can produce a small wince of your own, or why a stranger's yawn can pull a yawn out of you, almost against your will. The brain, in some quiet way, appears to rehearse the actions of others internally, as though briefly borrowing their experience to better understand it. This is not full mind reading, and researchers remain careful about overstating its role. But it points towards something tender at the center of human wiring, an automatic built-in tendency to internally echo the people around you. You have likely felt this echo countless times, tensing slightly when someone near you flinches, relaxing slightly when someone near you exhales in relief. That echo is not weakness. It is one of the quiet mechanisms by which humans remain connected to one another, bodies responding gently to other bodies long before any words are exchanged between them. The craft of acting rests almost entirely on a strange kind of negotiation with the audience's instinct to read faces and bodies for truth. Trained actors spend years learning to produce convincing emotional signals, on command timing a tightened jaw or a softened gaze, precisely enough to be read by an audience as authentic. even when no real feeling sits behind it in that particular moment. This is remarkably difficult to do well, which is part of why truly convincing performances are rare enough to be celebrated. The audience, meanwhile, sits in the dark, instinctively scanning every micro-movement of a performer's face, searching for the same signals it would search for in real life, largely without realizing it is doing so. An actor's success is measured in part by how completely they can satisfy that instinctive reading process, offering it exactly what it is, unconsciously searching for. This reveals something quietly remarkable about ordinary people watching a screen or a stage. The reading instinct does not switch off just because the setting is fictional. It remains fully active, fully engaged, treating a performer's face with the same seriousness it would treat a stranger's face on the street. You have likely been moved to real tears by a performance you knew logically was not real. That is not gullibility. It is simply the depth of an ability so old and so automatic that it does not pause to ask whether what it is reading is fiction or truth. Researchers studying deception detection have documented a small, unusual group of people, sometimes called highly accurate judges, who consistently identify lies at rates far above chance, far above even trained professionals in law enforcement. What makes this group especially interesting is not simply their accuracy, but their difficulty explaining it. When asked how they knew someone was lying, many of these gifted observers struggle to articulate a clear method. They describe a feeling, a sense that something did not fit without being able to name the exact cue that triggered it. Researchers who have studied them closely suspect these individuals are unconsciously tracking dozens of small inconsistencies at once. Mismatches between words and tone, between expression and timing, too fast and too numerous to describe individually, even though the brain is clearly registering them. This suggests that some forms of reading people operate below the threshold of language, entirely producing accurate conclusions the conscious mind cannot fully justify. It is a humbling reminder that not all knowledge announces itself with reasons attached. Perhaps you have experienced a smaller version of this, a moment of simply knowing something was not quite right, even while every visible detail seemed ordinary. That knowing was not baseless. It was likely built from real information gathered instantly and honestly by a part of you that does not always wait for permission to speak and does not always explain itself clearly, even to you. Among the very first behaviors a newborn displays is something researchers call imitation, and remarkably, facial imitation appears before almost any other coordinated movement an infant can manage. Shown a slowly opening mouth or a protruding tongue, infants only days old will often attempt the same movement themselves, however clumsily, long before they can reliably grasp an object or track a moving toy with steady eyes. This early imitation suggests that the wiring for reading and responding to another person's face may be among the very first systems to come fully online in human development, arriving ahead of nearly every other physical skill. It is as though the newborn brain decided before anything else that faces mattered most and deserved to be practiced first. This imitation likely serves an important early purpose, helping to build the first fragile threads of connection between infant and caregiver, long before words exist to carry that connection any other way. A return smile, however small and uncertain, becomes one of the earliest conversations a person ever has. You once took part in this conversation yourself, mirroring faces before you had any concept of what a face even was. That early fluency never fully disappeared. It settled quietly into the foundation of every later relationship you built, still present. Each time your own expression softens automatically in response to someone else's still practicing the very first language you ever learned, wordless and immediate. There is a common assumption that reading people well requires focused, deliberate attention, careful observation, effortful analysis. Much of the evidence suggests otherwise. Many of the most accurate reads people make of one another happen below conscious awareness, entirely registered by the body and the emotions. before the thinking mind has caught up, a slight unease around someone whose words seem perfectly friendly, a sudden warmth toward a stranger whose demeanor gives no obvious explanation. These reactions often reflect real information the unconscious mind has already processed, even while conscious reasoning lags behind, still searching for a tidy explanation to justify a feeling that arrived first. This is part of why gut reactions to people so often prove correct in hindsight, even when they could not be explained in the moment they occurred. The unconscious reading system appears to work quickly, quietly, and often accurately, gathering far more sensory detail than conscious attention could ever process manually in real time. This does not mean conscious analysis is useless. It simply means it is not the whole story, nor even the largest part of it. Much of the real reading has usually already happened by the time conscious thought arrives to comment on it. You have likely trusted this quiet system before, even without naming it, letting an unexplained feeling guide a small decision that later proved right. That trust was not naive. It was more often than not simply listening to a very old, very capable part of yourself. Among professionals whose work depends heavily on judging honesty, researchers have identified a striking pattern. Certain experienced interrogators, judges, and customs officials consistently outperform formal lie detection instruments in field studies, despite having no access to any equipment beyond their own attention and years of accumulated experience. This does not mean instinct always beats technology. Formal tools remain valuable, and instincts remain fallible. But the pattern is notable enough that researchers have studied these individuals closely, trying to understand what separates their judgment from that of equally experienced peers who perform closer to average. What they have found points less to any single dramatic insight and more to sheer accumulated exposure. Thousands of hours spent watching real human beings respond to real pressure, building a library of subtle cues, too vast and too specific to teach quickly to anyone else. Their skill resists easy transfer precisely because so much of it lives below the level of conscious explanation. It is less a technique than a texture, built slowly, case by case, face by face. This offers a quiet kind of comfort. Expertise in reading people is rarely a sudden gift. It is patient accumulation built through repeated attention over time. Whatever skill you have developed in reading the people closest to you followed the very same pattern, built slowly across years of simply paying attention, one ordinary moment stacked gently upon another. Long before any other part of the face becomes visible, the eyes are already communicating. Studies isolating just the eye region covering the rest of the face entirely have found that people can still identify basic emotional states with surprising accuracy from the eyes alone. A narrowing at the outer corners, a slight widening, the particular tension or looseness around the lids, each carries enough information to suggest sadness, alertness, warmth, or fear, even without the mouth's contribution. This is part of why cultures around the world have developed such rich, specific language around eyes, describing them as tired, bright, distant, soft, or sharp, long before science had any formal explanation for why those descriptions felt so accurate. The eyes appear to sit near the very center of emotional communication, perhaps because they are among the most difficult parts of the face to consciously control. A mouth can be arranged into a convincing smile through effort alone. The eyes resist that same effort, far more stubbornly leaking truth, even when the rest of the face has been carefully composed. You have likely relied on this yourself, glancing first at someone's eyes to check whether their smile matches what lives underneath it. That instinct is well-founded. The eyes, more than almost any other feature, tend to tell the truth first, quietly, steadily, whether or not the rest of the face has agreed to cooperate with them. Silence carries its own kind of information, and nowhere is this more evident than in the small pause that sometimes arrives just before a person answers a question. Researchers studying conversational timing have found that unusually long pauses, particularly before emotionally loaded questions, often signal internal processing hesitation or discomfort that the eventual spoken answer may not fully reveal. The words that follow might sound calm and certain, but the delay before them tells a quieter, more honest story about the effort it took to produce that calm. This is part of why a simple question can sometimes feel heavier than expected, not because of what was said, but because of how long it took to arrive. Skilled listeners often learn to notice this timing almost instinctively, sensing that something is being carefully chosen rather than simply spoken. It is a small detail, easy to miss if attention is elsewhere, and yet it can carry more honest weight than an entire paragraph of confident speech. You have likely felt this yourself, noticing a friend's hesitation before they said everything was fine, sensing that the pause itself was the truer answer. That sensitivity to timing is not overthinking. It is a quiet, well-founded form of listening, one that pays attention not only to what people say, but to the shape of the silence they leave just before they say it, and to everything that silence quietly holds. There is a curious asymmetry researchers have documented repeatedly. People are frequently better at reading the emotional states of others than at accurately reading their own. A person might notice immediately that a friend is anxious, picking up on subtle tension in posture and voice, while remaining genuinely uncertain about the source of their own unease in the very same moment. This is partly because reading others relies heavily on external, observable cues, the very same information the brain is so skilled at processing quickly. Reading oneself, by contrast, requires turning that same attention inward toward feelings that are often tangled, layered, and resistant to simple labeling. It is, in some ways, easier to read a face across the room than to read the quieter, more complicated territory inside one's own chest. This asymmetry is not a personal failing. It appears to be a fairly common feature of how human attention works, oriented outward by both instinct and long habit. Perhaps you have noticed this in your own life, offering a friend clear, gentle insight into their feelings while remaining foggy about your own in a similar situation. That gap is worth extending yourself the same patience you would offer someone else. The same careful attention you give so naturally to others is available to turn inward as well, slowly, gently, whenever you are ready to let it. Across the world, cultures have developed distinct, often unspoken rules about how much physical space, silence, and eye contact feel comfortable between people. And reading another person accurately often depends on understanding which set of rules is currently in play. In some cultural contexts, sustained eye contact signals confidence and honesty. In others, the same behavior can read as challenging or disrespectful. Some cultures treat comfortable silence during conversation as a sign of ease between people, while others experience the same silence as awkward or unfinished. None of these differences make one culture's reading more correct than another's. They simply reveal that reading people is never entirely universal. It is layered on top of learned cultural context, absorbed so early and so thoroughly that it feels like instinct rather than learning. This is part of why misunderstandings sometimes arise between people from different backgrounds, not from any failure of attention, but from applying one set of unspoken rules to a situation governed by another. Anyone who has traveled or built a close relationship across cultural lines has likely felt this firsthand, slowly learning a new grammar of glances and pauses. That learning is itself a quiet act of care, a willingness to expand the reading skill you already carry, teaching it new dialects, so it can meet more people more fully in whatever silent language they were raised to speak. Consider for a moment the sheer number of possible expressions a single human face can produce. Researchers who study facial movement have catalogued a coding system built from dozens of distinct muscle actions. And when these individual movements combine with one another, the number of possible expressions climbs into the thousands. A face is not simply happy, sad, angry, or afraid. It is capable of blending these states together in countless subtle combinations: a flicker of worry beneath a smile, a trace of relief inside an expression of exhaustion. To put this scale into something graspable, imagine a small orchestra where each muscle is an individual instrument, and every expression a unique arrangement drawn from that same limited set of players. Just as a handful of instruments can produce nearly endless musical combinations, a modest number of facial muscles produce an almost endless range of emotional expressions. This is part of why human faces feel so endlessly readable and yet so difficult to fully master reading. There is simply too much subtlety for any single glance to capture completely. And yet somehow, across a lifetime, people manage to become remarkably fluent readers of this vast expressive range, learning the particular combinations that belong to the individuals they love most. You likely know, without ever consciously cataloging it, the exact blend of expressions that means someone close to you is trying to seem fine when they are not. That fluency was built quietly, one small expression at a time, across every moment you ever paid attention to a face you cared about. Somewhere beneath the composed, deliberate expressions people choose to show one another, faster and far less controlled, signals sometimes slip through. Researchers call these micro-expressions brief, involuntary flashes of emotion that can appear and disappear in well under half a second, often too quick for the conscious eye to catch, without training or careful review. A flicker of fear crossing a face just before it settles into practiced calm. A trace of contempt appearing and vanishing beneath an otherwise pleasant smile. These fleeting signals are thought to occur when a person attempts to suppress or conceal a genuine emotional reaction, and the true feeling briefly escapes before the more deliberate expression can fully take over. To understand the timescale involved, consider that a single blink lasts roughly 1/10 of a second, and a micro-expression can be shorter still, a signal faster than the simple act of blinking. Most people never consciously register these flashes, and yet some research suggests the brain may register them at some deeper unconscious level, contributing to a vague, hard-to-explain feeling that something did not quite match. This may be part of why certain interactions leave behind an unexplained unease, a sense of dissonance the conscious mind cannot fully articulate. You may have felt this before, an instinctive hesitation around someone whose words seemed perfectly reasonable. That hesitation may have been your own quiet system catching something faster than thought itself could ever hope to name. Behind every expression that crosses a human face lies a surprisingly intricate system of muscle movement, one that researchers have spent decades carefully mapping and cataloging. The coding systems developed to study facial expression identify dozens of distinct, individually controllable muscle actions, each one capable of combining with others to produce the full range of human emotional display. A single sincere smile, for instance, involves a precise coordination between muscles at the corners of the mouth and muscles around the eyes, working together in a timing so specific that trained observers can distinguish it reliably from a merely polite smile lacking that same coordination. To imagine the scale involved, think of it as something closer to a small keyboard, where each muscle is a single key and every expression a chord built from several keys pressed together in careful combination. Just as a piano's finite keys can produce nearly limitless musical passages, this modest set of facial muscles produces the full, staggering range of human emotional expression, from the subtlest trace of concern to the most unmistakable outburst of joy. What is perhaps most remarkable is how effortlessly most people read this complex system without any formal training at all. No one is handed an instruction manual for interpreting a raised inner eyebrow or a tightened lower lid. And yet by adulthood, most people have absorbed this entire intricate language fluently, simply by watching thousands of faces across a lifetime, learning its grammar the same quiet way a child learns to speak through sheer patient exposure. The face is not the only instrument the body uses to communicate emotion. The voice carries its own rich layer of signal, and researchers studying vocal emotion have identified roughly 24 measurable qualities within speech that shift reliably depending on a speaker's emotional state. Pitch rises and falls. Speaking rate quickens or slows. The steadiness of breath changes, along with subtle shifts in loudness, rhythm, and the particular texture some researchers describe as vocal tension. None of these qualities require a single word to be understood correctly. A recording of someone speaking in an unfamiliar language can still convey fairly reliable emotional information simply through these underlying vocal patterns, understood across cultural and linguistic boundaries far more consistently than most people expect. To think of the scale involved, imagine the voice as its own separate orchestra, playing alongside the face, sometimes confirming what the face displays and sometimes revealing something the face has managed to hide. A person can arrange a calm, steady expression while their voice slightly higher and quicker than usual tells an entirely different story underneath it. Most listeners register this mismatch instinctively, even without consciously analyzing pitch or pacing at all. You have likely sensed this yourself, hearing a loved one insist they are fine, while some small, unnamed quality in their voice suggested otherwise. That instinct was tuned by the voice's own hidden language, one your ear has quietly understood for far longer than you have consciously realized. Spoken words often feel like the main event of a conversation, the part most consciously noticed and most easily remembered afterward. Researchers studying communication, however, have found that the non-verbal layer of an exchange, the facial expressions, gestures, posture shifts, and vocal tone accompanying speech, often carries a volume of information that dwarfs the words themselves. To make this scale easier to grasp, imagine a single sentence as a lit candle placed in the center of a large room. The words are the candle, small, precise, and visible. But the room around it, dim and vast, holds everything else. The posture of the speaker, the timing of their breath, the tension or ease in their shoulders, the particular way their eyes move while they speak. That surrounding room is where a great deal of the real communication quietly happens, often unnoticed by either person in the moment. This is part of why the same sentence can feel entirely different depending on who says it and how. A simple, "I'm fine," can carry reassurance or quiet distress depending almost entirely on the non-verbal room surrounding those two small words. Skilled communicators, whether trained professionally or shaped simply by attentive relationships, learn to listen to that fuller room rather than the candle alone. You do this constantly with people you know well, hearing far more in a familiar voice than the words alone could ever fully explain, gathering meaning from the whole quiet room surrounding every sentence spoken to you. Reading a face is not the work of a single isolated brain region working alone. It is a coordinated effort, spread across a network of areas, each contributing a different piece of the larger picture. One region specializes in recognizing facial structure itself, distinguishing one face from another. Another processes the emotional meaning layered on top of that structure. Still others integrate memory, allowing a face to be recognized as familiar and social context, helping determine what a particular expression likely means in a particular setting. To picture the scale of this coordination, imagine a small team of specialists gathered quickly around a single decision, each contributing their own narrow expertise within a fraction of a second, then combining their findings into one seamless, instant impression. No individual specialist sees the whole picture alone. The impression a person forms upon meeting someone new is the product of this quiet internal committee, working together so quickly and so smoothly that its complexity remains entirely invisible from the outside. This is part of why facial recognition can be so resilient, and also why it sometimes falters in specific telling ways when certain regions are affected by injury or illness, revealing just how many separate pieces were quietly cooperating all along. Every time you recognize a familiar face across a crowded room, This entire internal network has already completed its work before you consciously register the recognition, offering you a finished answer built from a process far more intricate than the simple, immediate feeling of knowing someone's face ever lets on. Communication researchers have long debated exactly how much of an emotional message travels through words compared to tone and body language. And while the precise proportions remain a subject of ongoing academic discussion, a consistent theme runs through much of this research. A substantial portion of emotional meaning tends to travel outside the words themselves. This finding is often cited more broadly than its original narrow context intended, and careful researchers caution against applying it too rigidly to every kind of conversation. Still, the underlying idea holds up across many everyday situations. When words and tone conflict, when someone says, "I'm not upset," in a voice that trembles slightly, listeners tend to trust the tone over the words, often without consciously deciding to do so. To imagine this dynamic, picture words as the visible tip of an iceberg, small, precise, easily counted, while tone, expression, and posture form the much larger mass beneath the surface, unseen at a glance, but carrying most of the actual weight. This is part of why written text, stripped of tone and expression entirely, is so easily misread, leaving only the small visible tip and none of the supporting mass beneath it. You have likely experienced this yourself, misreading a text message's tone entirely, only to have a single phone call correct the misunderstanding within seconds. The words had not changed. What returned was simply the rest of the iceberg quietly restoring the fuller shape of what was actually being said. Long before the face becomes the focus of attention, the body has often already begun communicating. Researchers studying posture and gesture have identified hundreds of distinct body positions and movements that reliably correspond to particular emotional or psychological states, from the way shoulders round forward under stress, way a chest lifts and opens during genuine confidence, crossed arms, a shifted stance, the angle of feet pointing subtly toward or away from another person. Each carries its own small piece of information, often communicated well before a single word is spoken. To grasp the scale involved, imagine the body as a second, slower kind of face, expressing feeling not through fleeting muscle flickers, but through the broader architecture of stance and gesture changes that unfold over seconds, rather than fractions of a second, yet remain just as informative in their own patient way. A person entering a room with their shoulders drawn up toward their ears is communicating tension long before their expression confirms it. Someone leaning gradually toward another person during conversation is signaling growing interest and comfort, often without any conscious intention to do so at all. This layer of communication tends to receive less deliberate attention than facial expression, and yet it is read constantly, quietly shaping first impressions in ways most people never pause to name. You have likely sensed a friend's exhaustion in their posture from clear across a room long before they said a single word about how their day had gone. Walk into any unfamiliar crowded space, a busy train platform, a full restaurant, an event filled with strangers, and something remarkable happens almost instantly. Within a matter of seconds, the brain performs a rapid scan of the environment, evaluating faces, postures, and overall mood, well before conscious attention settles on any single detail. This rapid environmental scanning appears to be an ancient survival mechanism, useful across human history for quickly distinguishing a safe gathering from a potentially dangerous one. To put the speed of this process into perspective, imagine trying to manually read 50 individual faces, one at a time, carefully assessing each in turn. That deliberate process might take several minutes to complete, thoughtfully. The unconscious scanning system accomplishes something remarkably similar in a fraction of that time, forming a general impression of the room's overall mood, almost instantly, long before conscious thought could ever hope to process each face individually. This is part of why certain spaces feel immediately comfortable, while others feel subtly tense, even when nothing specific has happened yet to justify either feeling. The scanning system has already gathered its impression from dozens of small cues, working together an overall tone rather than a single decisive piece of evidence. You have likely felt this yourself, walking into a party and sensing its mood before a single conversation had even begun, trusting an impression built faster than conscious reasoning could ever manage to explain. Among the smallest and most involuntary signals the human body offers, few are as quietly honest as the pupil. Research on pupil dilation has found that the pupils widen measurably in response to interest arousal, and certain emotional states changing size within a fraction of a second, and doing so almost entirely outside conscious control. Unlike a smile which can be summoned deliberately, or a posture which can be consciously adjusted, the pupil resists intentional manipulation almost completely. A person cannot simply decide to widen their pupils the way they might decide to smile politely. This makes pupil size one of the more reliable, if subtle indicators of genuine internal engagement, something skilled observers, including magicians and experienced negotiators, have long taken quiet advantage of even before science formally explained the mechanism behind it. To imagine the scale of this signal, consider that the change is often too small and too fast to consciously notice during an ordinary conversation, and yet the effect can still shape overall impressions, contributing to that vague sense that someone seems especially engaged or especially uninterested, without any clear explanation for why. Something in their eyes seemed different, though naming exactly what changed proves difficult. That vague impression may well be accurate, drawn from a signal too small for conscious detection, but not too small for the deeper reading system to notice and quietly factor into its overall unspoken assessment. Becoming genuinely skilled at reading deception under professional conditions is not a quick process. Training programs for interrogators and investigative interviewers typically involve thousands of hours of exposure, reviewing recorded interviews, practicing structured questioning techniques, and receiving detailed feedback across years of accumulated experience before reliable proficiency develops. To make this scale of practice easier to imagine, consider that thousands of hours stretched across a typical working career amounts to sitting across from thousands of individual conversations, each one slightly different, each one adding another small data point to an ever-growing internal library of human response patterns. No single interview teaches the whole skill. It is built gradually, case after case, the way a language is learned not from one lesson but from years of continued immersion. What experienced interrogators often describe is not a single dramatic technique, but a slowly sharpened sensitivity to inconsistency. Noticing when a story's timeline shifts slightly between tellings or when someone's emotional tone does not quite match the content of what they are describing. This patient cumulative nature of the skill offers a useful lesson beyond any professional context. Reading people well is rarely about a single clever trick. It is built the same slow way anywhere it appears through repeated attentive exposure over time. Whatever skill you carry in reading the people closest to you was very likely built the same patient way, one ordinary conversation gently layered upon another. To determine which parts of emotional expression are truly universal and which are shaped by culture, researchers have conducted studies spanning participants from dozens of countries across vastly different cultural backgrounds. These large cross-cultural studies have found that a handful of core expressions, including joy, sadness, anger, fear, disgust, and surprise, tend to be recognized with notable consistency across widely different populations, suggesting a shared biological foundation beneath humanity's emotional expression. At the same time, these same studies reveal meaningful cultural variation in display rules, the unwritten social guidelines governing when and how openly certain emotions are expressed in public. To imagine the scale of this research, Picture gathering participants from every continent speaking dozens of different languages raised under entirely different social customs, and still finding that a basic expression of joy looks recognizably similar on all of their faces. That consistency spanning such enormous cultural distance suggests something genuinely deep and shared within the architecture of human emotional expression itself, something present long before any particular culture had the chance to shape it further. And yet the differences matter too, reminding researchers and everyday observers alike that reading people accurately requires holding both truths together at once: the universal foundation and the cultural variation layered carefully on top of it, each equally real, each worth patient attention. Among all the visual information the human brain processes each day, faces receive an unusually large and specialized share of dedicated processing resources. Certain regions within the brain's visual system appear to be substantially devoted to facial recognition, specifically more so than almost any other single category of visual object a person regularly encounters. This dedicated processing helps explain why faces feel so immediately compelling, so difficult to ignore, even in situations where attention is meant to be focused elsewhere entirely. To imagine the scale of this specialization, consider that most visual objects, chairs, trees, buildings, are processed using more general-purpose visual machinery, shared broadly across many categories of things a person might look at. Faces, by contrast, appear to warrant their own more specialized processing pathway, as though the brain long ago decided that faces mattered enough to deserve their own dedicated attention. This is part of why people are so remarkably good at spotting faces, even in ambiguous face-like patterns, seeing expressions in clouds in the front of a car, in the arrangement of two windows and a door. The system built to detect faces is so sensitive, so heavily resourced, that it sometimes fires even when no actual face is present at all. That sensitivity is not a flaw. It is evidence of just how deeply important reading faces has always been to human survival and connection, important enough to earn its own generous share of the brain's limited visual attention. Long before a face becomes visible, a person's walk is already communicating something. Researchers studying gait, the particular rhythm and manner of someone's walking, have found that observers can often guess a walker's emotional state with reasonable accuracy from a distance based on nothing more than posture, stride length, and the swing of arms and shoulders. A person walking with slow, heavy steps and downturned shoulders often reads as sad or fatigued, even to observers who cannot see any facial detail at all. A brisk, bouncing stride with loose, swinging arms often reads as confident or content. To imagine the distance at which this reading remains possible, picture recognizing a friend's mood clear across a large parking lot, long before their face comes into focus, simply from the particular rhythm of how they are walking toward you. That recognition is not guesswork. It draws on real, measurable patterns the body produces reliably when carrying certain emotional states, patterns visible even from far away, even in silhouette, even in poor lighting. This is part of why a phone call announcing bad news sometimes feels unnecessary to someone who has already sensed something was wrong the moment they saw a loved one's particular way of walking through the door. The body announces itself early, well before words arrive, to confirm what the walk had already quietly made clear. Within the span of an ordinary conversation, far more is happening than the exchange of words alone. Researchers studying interpersonal synchrony have found that two people talking together often fall into subtle, rapid patterns of matched movement. Mirrored blinking, synchronized nodding, small shifts in posture that echo one another within. Moments occurring so frequently across even a short exchange that the total count of these tiny synchronized signals can climb into the thousands. To imagine this scale, picture two dancers who have never rehearsed together, somehow falling into a shared rhythm within seconds of starting to move, adjusting constantly and invisibly to stay in step with one another. Conversation partners do something remarkably similar. without any conscious choreography at all. Each small gesture prompting an answering gesture in the other person, back and forth, largely unnoticed by either party in the moment. This synchrony tends to increase when two people feel a genuine sense of connection, and researchers have found that conversations marked by higher synchrony are often remembered afterward as warmer and more satisfying, even when neither participant could name exactly why. This offers a quiet insight into what makes certain conversations feel effortless, while others feel strained. The effortless ones are often invisibly more synchronized. You have likely felt this difference yourself, sensing after a conversation that something had simply flowed without being able to explain precisely what made it feel that way. The thousands of tiny matched movements working quietly beneath the surface the whole time. Long before any formal science of body language existed, legal systems around the world had already built entire traditions around the practice of reading people. For centuries, courts have placed significant weight on witness demeanor, the way a person's composure, eye contact, and tone shift while testifying, treating these cues as meaningful evidence of credibility, sometimes given as much practical weight as the spoken testimony itself. This long-standing legal tradition reflects an old, deeply held belief, one that predates any scientific study, that the body reveals truth the words alone might not fully carry. Modern researchers have since complicated this picture considerably, showing that demeanor cues are far less reliable indicators of honesty than courts once assumed, and that nervousness under legal pressure can easily be mistaken for deception, even in a genuinely truthful witness. Still, the sheer historical persistence of this practice, stretching back across many different legal traditions and centuries, says something important about how deeply humans trust their instinct to read another person's demeanor, even when that instinct sometimes leads them astray. To imagine the span involved, consider generations of judges across centuries, each one leaning forward slightly to watch a witness's hands, their eyes, the particular hesitation in their voice, trusting that instinct, the same way their own ancestors once had. That old instinct still lives quietly within you as well, present every time you find yourself watching someone's face a little more closely while they explain something important. Humans are not alone in possessing a richly expressive face. Researchers comparing facial musculature across species have found that certain primates, particularly chimpanzees and other close evolutionary relatives, share dozens of overlapping facial muscles with humans, allowing them to produce expressions that closely resemble human fear, playfulness, and distress. This shared muscular architecture suggests that the roots of facial expression stretch back deep into evolutionary history, present in a common ancestor long before humans existed as a distinct species at all. To imagine this shared inheritance picture, an old family recipe passed down and slightly altered across many generations, still recognizably related to its original form, even after significant changes along the way. Human facial expression carries something similar, a deep evolutionary recipe, adapted and refined over millions of years, yet still visibly related to expressions found in other primates today. This is part of why certain primate expressions feel oddly familiar even to untrained observers. A play face that resembles a human smile, a fear grimace that echoes something instantly recognizable. Watching these expressions in another species offers a strange and moving kind of perspective, a glimpse into how ancient and how deeply embedded the practice of reading faces truly is, older than language, older than human history itself, carried forward quietly across an almost unimaginable span of time, arriving eventually unchanged in its essential purpose in the quiet space between your face and the face of anyone you have ever cared about. Emotion does not always stay contained within the person who first feels it. Researchers studying what is known as emotional contagion have found that feelings can spread measurably through a group of people, even strangers, with no prior relationship within a matter of minutes, simply through shared exposure to facial expressions, tone of voice, and body language. A single anxious person entering a calm waiting room can gradually shift the overall mood of that room, often without saying a single word about what is troubling them. Conversely, a genuinely relaxed, warm presence can noticeably ease tension in a group that started out stressed. To imagine the scale of this spread, picture a single drop of ink released into still water, gradually diffusing outward until the entire surface has shifted color, subtly but unmistakably changed by something that began in one small, contained point. Human emotion appears to move through groups in a remarkably similar way, less through deliberate communication and more through quiet, continuous absorption, each person unconsciously picking up small cues from those nearby and beginning, gradually, to reflect them back. This helps explain why certain environments, a tense office, a joyful celebration, a grieving gathering, can feel so powerfully immersive, pulling nearly everyone present into a shared emotional current. You have likely felt this yourself, entering a room already carrying one mood, and leaving sometime later quietly carrying another, absorbed gradually from everyone else who shared that space and time with you. The desire to understand what a person's face and manner reveal about their inner character is far from a modern preoccupation. Historical texts addressing this exact subject stretch back thousands of years, appearing across ancient civilizations that had no contact with one another, each independently developing its own detailed system for interpreting facial features, posture, and expression as clues to underlying character and fate. These ancient systems varied enormously in their specific claims, and many of their conclusions have not held up under later scientific scrutiny. What remains striking, however, is not their accuracy but their sheer persistence across such a vast span of human history and geography. To imagine the scale of this shared human interest, picture scholars, separated by thousands of years and thousands of miles, working in entirely different languages and entirely different belief systems, all independently arriving at the same underlying conviction that a person's face holds. Meaningful information worth studying closely and carefully. That such distant, disconnected cultures kept returning to the same basic pursuit suggests something deeply rooted in human nature itself, a persistent, almost universal hunger to understand other people more clearly by watching them closely. You carry a small, quiet piece of that same ancient hunger every time you study a loved one's face, a little more carefully, trying gently to understand what they are feeling, continuing a pursuit that history suggests has occupied thoughtful people for as long as there have been faces to study at all. Contemporary research into reading emotion no longer relies on small, isolated studies alone. Decades of accumulated data drawn from thousands of participants across countless individual studies conducted around the world now inform current scientific understanding of how humans express and interpret emotion. This long accumulation allows researchers to identify patterns with far greater confidence than any single study could offer on its own, comparing results across different cultures, age groups, and contexts to separate genuinely universal patterns from more narrow, culturally specific ones. To imagine the scale of this accumulated knowledge, picture an enormous, slowly filled library, each individual study contributing just one small volume, until decades of patient contribution have built something vast enough to reveal patterns, invisible from within any single book alone. This kind of large-scale, long-term research helps correct earlier assumptions that once seemed reasonable but did not hold up, once tested more broadly and carefully across diverse populations. It is humbling, careful, unglamorous work, built patiently across entire careers, each researcher adding a small, honest piece to a much larger shared understanding. And in a much smaller personal way, this mirrors something true about your own life as well. Whatever skill you carry today in reading the people closest to you was built the same slow, accumulated way, one relationship at a time, one quiet observation layered gently upon another, until a genuine, trustworthy understanding gradually took shape within you, built patiently across years. You may not have even realized you were counting. Think for a moment of someone you have known for years, someone whose presence has become deeply familiar to you. The moment they walk through your door, you already know something about how they are feeling, often before a single word passes between you. It is there, in the particular way they close the door behind them, in the pace of their steps, in whether their shoulders sit high with tension or loose with ease. You are not guessing in that moment. You are reading, drawing on years of accumulated familiarity with exactly how this one particular person carries their good days and their hard ones. This kind of reading is different from reading a stranger, richer, more specific, built from thousands of small, remembered moments that have taught you their particular language of mood. You know the difference between their tired silence and their upset silence, even though both might look nearly identical to someone who does not know them as well as you do. That precision did not arrive by accident. It was built slowly, visit by visit, conversation by conversation, until their face became something closer to a familiar handwriting you could recognize even from a distance. Tonight, let yourself appreciate that quiet fluency. It represents real closeness, earned patiently over time. The next time someone you love walks through your door, notice how much you already know before they say a single word, and let that noticing feel like what it truly is, a form of love expressed through attention. Among the most remarkable feats of everyday reading happens quietly in homes all over the world whenever a parent listens to their infant cry. Research has found that many parents, particularly primary caregivers, can distinguish a hunger cry from a tired cry from a discomfort cry, often with real accuracy, despite each cry sounding nearly identical to unfamiliar ears. This distinction is not taught in any formal sense. No manual explains the exact difference in rhythm or pitch that separates one need from another. It is learned entirely through repeated, attentive exposure, night after night, until subtle differences that once sounded indistinguishable become unmistakably clear. This is reading people at its most essential and most tender, decoding another person's need before that person has any words at all to express it themselves. A parent who reaches instinctively for a bottle rather than a blanket correctly in the middle of the night is performing a genuinely impressive act of interpretation, even though it likely feels to them like nothing more than ordinary instinct. That instinct, though, was built the same way every reading skill is built, through sustained loving attention, repeated so many times that it eventually became automatic. If you have ever done this yourself correctly, meeting a need before it was even spoken, you already understand something profound about how love shapes perception. Attention given consistently enough, over enough sleepless nights, eventually becomes a form of fluent, wordless understanding. There is a particular kind of silence that exists only between people who know each other well, a silence that carries no tension in it at all, only ease. You likely know this silence already, the comfortable quiet that settles over a car ride with an old friend, or the shared stillness of sitting together without needing to fill every moment with conversation. Reading this correctly, understanding that this particular silence means closeness rather than distance, is itself a quiet form of expertise, one built entirely through experience with this specific person. A stranger sharing that same silence might read it as awkward or unfinished. You read it correctly as comfortable, because you have learned through repetition exactly what this friend's silence tends to mean. This distinction matters more than it might seem. Misreading comfortable silence as distance can create unnecessary worry, filling a peaceful quiet with unwarranted concern. Correctly reading it as ease instead allows you to simply rest inside the moment, trusting the relationship enough to let stillness exist without needing to interpret it as a problem. That trust is itself a form of intimacy, built slowly across many shared silences that taught you gradually which quiet moments needed attention, and which ones simply needed to be allowed to exist. Tonight, if any comfortable silence comes to mind, let yourself recognize it for what it truly is: evidence of a closeness, patient enough to not require constant words. Researchers studying long-term romantic relationships have observed a particular phenomenon that tends to emerge after many years shared together: a tendency for partners to anticipate and complete each other's sentences often, without either person consciously noticing they are doing it. This is not mind reading in any mystical sense. It is the natural result of years spent absorbing another person's particular patterns of speech, their favorite phrases, the predictable direction their stories tend to take. A shared history this deep creates a kind of fluency, allowing one partner to sense almost before a sentence finishes exactly where the other one is headed with it. This fluency extends well beyond speech alone. Long-term partners often develop a broader sensitivity to each other's moods, needs, and unspoken signals, built cumulatively across thousands of ordinary days spent simply near one another. It is easy to overlook how remarkable this kind of understanding actually is, precisely because it tends to feel effortless by the time it fully develops. But effortlessness in this case is not the absence of skill. It is the visible sign of skill so thoroughly practiced that it no longer requires conscious effort to perform. If you share this kind of fluency with anyone in your life, a partner, a sibling, a lifelong friend, let yourself notice it gently tonight. It represents years of quiet, accumulated attention, one of the most patient and enduring forms of understanding one person can offer another. Researchers studying nonverbal connection have found that people naturally, unconsciously mirror the posture and movement of others. They feel emotionally close to leaning when the other person leans, crossing arms shortly after the other person crosses theirs, adjusting position to echo one another, without either party consciously deciding to do so. This mirroring tends to increase specifically during moments of genuine rapport, and researchers have found that conversations marked by more mirroring are often remembered afterward as warmer and more satisfying. You have almost certainly done this yourself countless times, with people you feel close to your body quietly adjusting to match theirs without any deliberate intention behind it. This is one of the more tender forms of reading people, because it happens in reverse as well. The mirroring itself, often deepening the sense of connection, rather than simply reflecting connection that already existed. Body and feeling move together in both directions, each one gently reinforcing the other. The next time you notice yourself unconsciously matching someone's posture, sitting the way they sit, softening when they soften, let yourself recognize what that mirroring actually represents. It is not imitation for its own sake. It is your body quietly participating in closeness, offering back without words the same warmth being offered to you. A small physical echo of connection, happening constantly, gently beneath the surface of nearly every comfortable conversation you have ever had with someone you care about. Within long, familiar relationships, certain small expressions accumulate an entire history of meaning, until a single raised eyebrow held for just a moment can communicate as much as an entire sentence might in a newer relationship. This compression of meaning develops, slowly built from countless earlier moments, when that same small expression accompanied a particular kind of comment, a particular kind of shared joke, a particular unspoken warning. Over time, the expression itself becomes shorthand, no longer requiring the original context to carry its full meaning. You likely have several of these shared shorthand expressions with the people closest to you. A specific look that means someone is exaggerating, a specific glance that means it is time to leave a gathering, a specific softened expression that simply means I see you without needing to say anything further at all. These small signals represent an entire private language built patiently between two people over years, understood by almost no one else, and yet completely clear to the two of you. This is one of the quiet gifts of long familiarity. The way meaning becomes compressed into smaller and smaller gestures, the more two people come to know one another. If you share a look like this with someone in your life, let yourself appreciate it tonight for what it truly is: a small, private inheritance built entirely from shared history, carried lightly now, in nothing more than the simple lift of an eyebrow. There is a small, familiar moment many people know well, the instant between a phone beginning to ring and a voice finally answering, when some quiet part of the mind has already begun forming a guess about the caller's mood. Sometimes this guess comes from context, an unusual hour, a pattern of recent calls, but often it comes from something harder to name, a subtle instinct built from long familiarity with how this particular person tends to sound in different emotional states. The moment they say hello, that guess is frequently confirmed within the very first syllable. A slight tightness in the voice, a particular flatness, or an unmistakable brightness that tells you everything before any actual news has been shared. This is reading people distilled down to its barest form, voice alone, stripped of face and posture entirely, and yet still remarkably informative when the relationship behind it runs deep enough. Long-distance friendships and family relationships often rely heavily on this kind of vocal reading, developing a particular sensitivity to tone precisely because other cues are simply unavailable. You have likely experienced this yourself, sensing immediately that a loved one's call carried difficult news long before they found the words to explain what had happened. That instinct was not chance. It was the product of real, accumulated familiarity. Another quiet form of closeness, built patiently across years of listening carefully enough to know a voice almost as well as a face. Experienced teachers often describe a particular skill that develops gradually across years in the classroom: the ability to sense a room's overall mood within the very first minute of a class, beginning well before any individual student has spoken a single word. A room can feel restless, distracted, anxious, or unusually subdued, and skilled teachers learn to read this collective mood the way a sailor might read a change in weather through countless small cues gathered simultaneously: posture, eye contact, the particular quality of the room's overall quiet. This skill, built through sustained daily exposure to groups of students, allows a teacher to adjust their approach almost immediately, softening a lesson plan on a heavier day or channeling restless energy productively on a more distracted one. To imagine the scale of practice behind this instinct, consider a teacher standing in front of new groups of students day after day, year after year, each classroom slightly different from the last, each one adding another small data point, an ever-expanding internal sense of what a healthy, engaged room feels like compared to a struggling one. This ability rarely receives much formal recognition, and yet it represents a genuinely sophisticated form of reading. People practiced quietly, patiently across thousands of ordinary mornings. If you have ever walked into a room and immediately sensed its mood, without being able to explain exactly how you were drawing on this same quiet, well-practiced instinct, built the same patient way teachers build theirs. There is a particular kind of trust many people place, often without fully realizing it, in the tone of a doctor's voice, rather than the precise content of their words. Research on patient communication has found that a calm, steady vocal tone significantly influences how reassured a patient feels, sometimes even more than the specific medical information being delivered. A diagnosis explained in a warm, unhurried voice tends to feel less frightening than the same information delivered quickly or anxiously, even though the underlying facts remain entirely unchanged. This reveals something important about how deeply tone shapes the reading of a situation's true severity. Patients are not simply listening to words in a medical setting. They are reading the entire presence of the person speaking to them, searching, often unconsciously, for confirmation that things are being handled with steady, capable care. A doctor's calm does not change the facts of a diagnosis, but it changes how those facts are received and carried afterward. You have likely experienced this yourself, feeling measurably calmer after a conversation with someone whose steady tone reassured you, even when the actual information shared was serious. That calming effect was not naive or misplaced. It reflects something real. The ancient human tendency to read safety through tone as much as through content, trusting the steadiness of another person's voice as genuine evidence that things remain within capable, careful hands. Anyone who has shared a home with a dog for any length of time likely knows the particular experience of reading their pet's mood with real, practiced accuracy, sensing excitement in a wagging tail's specific rhythm or worry in ears held back and a lowered head. What makes this relationship especially remarkable is that the reading runs in both directions. Research on dog behavior has found that dogs are highly attuned to their owner's emotional state as well, responding with visible concern to signs of sadness in a person's voice or posture, sometimes even attempting to offer comfort through physical closeness. This creates a genuinely mutual reading relationship, each party continuously interpreting the other's mood and adjusting their own behavior in response. To imagine the depth of this mutual attunement, consider a bond built entirely without shared language, relying instead on years of careful, patient observation from both sides. Human learning a dog's particular signals, and dog learning a dog's, human's particular ones, in return. This quiet, wordless fluency often deepens into something remarkably precise. An owner sensing illness in their pet before any obvious symptom appears, or a dog sensing sadness in their owner before a single tear has fallen. If you share this kind of relationship with an animal, let yourself appreciate tonight how much patient, loving attention it took to build on both sides, a fluency requiring no words at all, only steady, careful presence. Among the more subtle forms of reading people is the quiet skill of sensing what someone actually needs in a difficult moment, comfort rather than advice, or occasionally the reverse. This distinction is rarely stated outright. A friend rarely announces which one they are seeking as they begin sharing something painful. Instead, it must be read gathered from tone, from pacing, from whether their words seem to be searching for a solution or simply searching for space to be heard. People who read this well tend to hold back the impulse to immediately offer fixes, sensing instead when simple presence is what is actually needed. This skill develops through attentive experience with specific individuals over time, learning gradually which friends tend to want practical help and which ones tend to want quiet company first, practical help only afterward, if at all. Misreading this distinction, however well-intentioned, can leave a person feeling unheard, even amid genuine care. Reading it correctly, by contrast, can make someone feel deeply understood, even without a single problem actually being solved in that moment. If you have ever offered a friend exactly what they needed, without them having to ask for it directly, you were practicing a quiet, sophisticated form of emotional reading, built from real attention paid across your history together. That kind of understanding is not automatic for everyone. It is a gift cultivated carefully, offered gently, one attentive moment at a time. Anyone who has spent time in a shared workplace likely knows the particular feeling of sensing tension in a meeting well before it is ever named. Allowed a subtle shift in posture around the table, a longer pause than usual before someone answers a question, an unusual carefulness in how a disagreement gets phrased. Long before anyone states directly that something is wrong, the room has often already communicated it clearly through timing, tone, and the particular quality of silence that settles in after a pointed comment. Colleagues who work together regularly become skilled readers of this atmosphere, developing a shared, largely unspoken sense of when a meeting is running smoothly and when something underneath the surface needs careful attention. This reading ability, while rarely discussed explicitly, plays a significant role in how teams navigate disagreement and stress together, often adjusting their approach based on atmosphere long before any formal conversation addresses the issue directly. To imagine how this sensitivity builds, Consider months or years of shared meetings, each one adding a small piece to an increasingly accurate internal sense of what this particular group's tension actually looks and sounds like. If you have ever felt a meeting's mood shift before anyone said a difficult word aloud, you are exercising this same quiet, collectively built skill, one shared patiently among people who have simply spent enough time together to read each other's unspoken signals with real practiced accuracy. There is a particular quietly uncomfortable feeling that arises when speaking to someone whose attention has drifted, even while their face remains politely turned toward you. Something about the timing of their responses, the slight delay before a nod, the way their eyes hold steady without truly tracking what is being said, gives the moment away, even when every visible detail seems at a glance perfectly attentive. This ability to sense inner tension, even through a convincing outward performance of listening, draws on subtle timing cues that are difficult to consciously name, but easy to unconsciously register. A truly engaged listener's responses tend to land with a particular naturalness questions, arriving at moments that show genuine tracking of what was just said, rather than generic prompts inserted at safe intervals. You have likely felt the difference yourself, the distinct sense of being truly heard compared to being merely tolerated, even when both listeners appeared outwardly similar. This sensitivity matters because it reveals something tender about what people are actually searching for in conversation. Not simply a polite audience, but genuine presence, felt and recognized as real. If you have ever noticed someone drifting away from a conversation despite their best effort to appear present, trust that noticing. It is a legitimate reading built from real signals, and it is worth remembering the next time you are the one listening. The true presence, however quiet, is almost always felt by the person speaking and almost always deeply appreciated. Touch occupies a unique place among the many ways people communicate comfort to one another, arriving faster than words and often carrying more immediate reassurance than any sentence could offer in the same instant. Research on touch and emotional communication has found that a simple, gentle touch, a hand resting briefly on a shoulder, can communicate specific emotional messages with surprising accuracy, sometimes even conveying distinct emotions like gratitude, sympathy, or reassurance, identifiable by the recipient without any accompanying words at all. This suggests that touch carries its own distinct vocabulary, understood by the body, in ways that bypass the slower, more deliberate process of interpreting spoken language. A comforting touch offered at the right moment can settle a racing heartbeat faster than any explanation possibly could, because it does not require translation. It simply arrives understood immediately, by a body already primed to recognize its meaning. This is part of why physical comfort so often feels more immediately calming than well-intentioned words offered in a difficult moment. Not because words lack value, but because touch moves through a faster, older channel of understanding. You have likely experienced this yourself, feeling a wave of relief the instant someone you trust rested a hand gently on your shoulder during a hard moment, long before either of you said anything further. That relief was not imagined. It was your body accurately reading one of the oldest, most immediate languages of comfort humans have ever shared with one another. Small, ordinary gestures often carry more information about a stranger's character than most people consciously realize in the moment. The particular way someone holds a door open, whether they glance back to check if anyone else is approaching, whether they hold it a beat longer than strictly necessary, offers a small but genuine window into their underlying disposition. These micro-gestures are rarely deliberate performances. They tend to reflect habitual patterns of attention, quiet evidence of whether a person's default orientation toward the world leans toward consideration or indifference. You likely form quick, largely unconscious impressions from gestures exactly like this one, someone letting you merge in traffic with an easy wave, someone stepping aside patiently on a crowded sidewalk, someone offering a genuine smile to a stranger for no particular reason at all. None of these moments involve any real conversation, and yet each one offers real, if small, information about the person performing them. This is part of what makes public spaces such a quietly rich source of human reading, countless brief interactions with strangers, each one a tiny data point about the kind of attention that particular person tends to offer the world around them. The next time a stranger's small kindness catches your attention, notice how immediately and clearly it registers a brief, wordless glimpse into another person's character, offered freely read instinctively and often remembered far longer than either party would expect. The early weeks of caring for a newborn are often described as disorienting, exhausting, and full of uncertainty. And yet, within a remarkably short span of time, many new parents develop a surprisingly precise ability to distinguish their own baby's different cries from one another. What initially sounds like an undifferentiated wall of sound gradually resolves, often within just a few weeks, into a recognizable set of distinct signals, a particular rising pitch that means hunger, a particular broken rhythm that means overtiredness, a sharper, more urgent tone that means real discomfort. This rapid learning curve reflects just how motivated and attentive early caregiving tends to be. Concentrated exposure, compressed into an intensely focused stretch of time. To imagine the pace of this learning, consider that a skill many professionals spend years developing in other contexts. Precise emotional discrimination through sound alone is often substantially achieved by exhausted new parents within a matter of weeks, driven by love and necessity rather than formal training. This is one of the more striking examples of how quickly reading skills can develop when attention is sustained and deeply motivated. If you have ever cared for an infant and found yourself suddenly, almost without noticing, able to tell their cries apart with real confidence, you experienced this remarkable acceleration firsthand, proof that some of the most impressive reading skills people ever develop are quietly built, not in a classroom, but at 3 a.m, cradling someone too small yet to speak. Laughter, though often treated as a simple expression of amusement, actually carries a surprising amount of individual variation, and people who know each other well tend to become remarkably sensitive to a friend's particular baseline laugh, noticing almost immediately when it sounds slightly different than usual. A laugh that seems shorter, or held a fraction too tightly, or missing its usual easy looseness, can register as a subtle signal that something beneath the surface is not quite right, even when the person laughing insists everything is fine. This kind of recognition depends entirely on deep familiarity built from countless earlier instances of hearing this specific person's genuine relaxed laugh, enough times to recognize deviations from it almost instinctively. A stranger would likely notice nothing unusual at all. You, having spent real time with this particular person, notice immediately, because you are comparing what you are hearing now against a rich, detailed internal memory of what their laughter usually sounds like when nothing is wrong. This sensitivity, though rarely discussed directly, represents one of the quieter forms of intimacy. Two people can share a familiarity precise enough to notice small emotional weather changes in something as fleeting as a laugh. If you have ever caught yourself thinking that a friend's laugh sounded slightly off tonight, trust that instinct. It was built from real closeness, and it is more often than not, remarkably accurate. Within the practice of talk therapy, a significant portion of a therapist's trained attention is directed not at the words being spoken, but at the silences surrounding them, the particular pause before a difficult topic is approached, the length of hesitation before an honest answer finally arrives. Therapists are specifically trained to notice these silences as meaningful data in their own right, sometimes revealing more about a client's internal experience than the words that eventually follow. A long pause before answering a simple question may suggest the question was not actually simple at all for that particular person. A sudden, unusually quick answer may suggest a topic being deflected rather than genuinely considered. This trained attentiveness to silence reflects a broader truth about reading people. That absence of speech is never truly empty, but is instead filled with its own kind of information, waiting patiently to be noticed by someone willing to listen closely enough. Skilled therapists learn to hold space for these silences, rather than rushing to fill them, understanding that the silence itself is often doing important quiet work. You have likely practiced a smaller version of this instinct yourself, sensing that a friend's hesitation before answering a hard question mattered as much as whatever they eventually said. That sensitivity to silence is a real and valuable form of listening, one worth trusting, one that recognizes correctly that some of the most honest parts of a conversation sometimes arrive before any words are spoken at all. There is a particular, almost physical quality to the way a room's atmosphere can change. The instant someone upset walks into it, a subtle shift felt by nearly everyone present, even before that person has said a single word about what happened. Conversations quiet slightly. Attention redirects, often without any conscious decision to redirect it. This collective sensitivity reflects how thoroughly human beings are wired to register emotional atmosphere as a shared communal experience, rather than something isolated to one individual alone. A single person's visible distress seems to ripple outward, absorbed gradually by everyone nearby, each person adjusting their own tone and energy in quiet response. To imagine the immediacy of this shift, picture a calm pond disturbed by a single stone, the ripples moving outward steadily until the whole surface has been gently altered by something that began in one small point of contact. Human emotional atmosphere behaves in a remarkably similar way, spreading quickly and thoroughly through a shared space. You have likely experienced this yourself, feeling an entire gathering shift the moment someone walked in, visibly upset the whole room, softening its volume and pace in quiet, immediate response. This sensitivity is not accidental or excessive. It reflects a deep, old capacity for shared emotional awareness, one that allows groups of people to respond together gently and collectively to a single person's pain offering, without needing to be asked a softened space to land in. There is a particular kind of quiet perceptiveness many grandparents seem to carry, an ability to read a grandchild's face with startling accuracy, often noticing worry or sadness the child themselves assumed was successfully hidden. This perceptiveness likely draws on decades of accumulated experience, reading faces across an entire lifetime, refined further by the specific attentiveness that so often accompanies grandparenthood, a slower, more patient kind of watching than busier parenting years sometimes allow. A grandchild who insists everything is fine may find themselves gently, knowingly met with a raised eyebrow and a soft question that suggests otherwise correctly. This experience can feel almost startling to a child or teenager, unaccustomed to being read so accurately, and yet it reflects something tender rather than intrusive, a lifetime of careful attention finally meeting someone young enough to still be surprised by how visible their feelings actually are. To imagine the depth of practice behind this perceptiveness, consider decades spent reading faces across an entire family's history, children, then grandchildren, each one slightly different, each one adding further nuance to an already substantial well of accumulated understanding. If you have ever been gently caught by an older relative who somehow knew exactly how you were feeling before you said a word, you experienced this same quiet expertise firsthand. Patient and hard-won, offered not as intrusion but as a particular generous form of long-practiced love. Pride, when genuinely felt, tends to show itself through a particular combination of signals that are difficult to fake. Convincingly, a softening around the eyes, a certain steadiness in how someone holds your gaze, a beat longer than usual, warmth in tone that carries even through simple, ordinary words. You likely know this feeling well, the distinct sense of recognizing that someone's pride in you is genuine rather than merely polite, drawn from cues that extend well beyond whatever words they actually chose to say. A parent's simple good job can carry an entire weight of real feeling behind it, communicated through tone and expression, far more than through the words themselves, which on their own might seem almost unremarkable. This distinction between polite acknowledgement and genuine pride is one that people tend to read remarkably accurately, especially from those closest to them, because the underlying emotional signals are difficult to convincingly perform, without real feeling behind them. You have likely felt the specific warmth of recognizing this truth firsthand, sensing without any doubt that someone's pride in you was real, carried in their eyes and their voice, long before you had fully processed their actual words. That recognition is not wishful thinking. It reflects a genuinely accurate reading of real emotional signals, and it deserves to be trusted and held onto gently as clear evidence of how visible your own worth has been to someone who loves you. Across many years of shared history, close friendships often develop an entire private shorthand of glances and small gestures, a particular look that means it is time to leave a gathering, a specific expression that means a shared joke has just been silently acknowledged, a quick raised eyebrow that communicates an entire complicated opinion about something just witnessed together. This shorthand develops gradually built from thousands of shared moments and becomes so deeply understood between two people that it requires no explanation at all, remaining almost entirely invisible to anyone else present. To imagine the depth of this shared language, picture two people at a crowded event, exchanging a single brief glance across the room that somehow conveys an entire paragraph of shared meaning, understood instantly and completely by both, while everyone else remains entirely unaware anything was communicated at all. This kind of private fluency represents one of the quiet rewards of long friendship, an intimacy expressed not through grand gestures, but through small, accumulated, deeply specific understanding. If you share this kind of shorthand with a close friend, a look, a gesture, a single word that carries an entire shared history behind it, let yourself appreciate tonight how rare and valuable that fluency actually is. It was built patiently, gathering over many years into something now so effortless, it barely requires conscious thought at all. There is something remarkable about how much comfort a familiar voice can still carry, even through a poor connection, static, crackling words occasionally cutting out entirely, and yet the underlying warmth and familiarity of the voice itself often comes through clearly regardless. This suggests that emotional recognition through voice does not depend solely on perfect clarity or complete information. It draws on something deeper, a long accumulated familiarity with a particular voice's underlying tone and rhythm, familiar enough to be recognized and trusted even through significant distortion. A loved one's voice, however fragmented by distance or poor signal, still carries enough of its essential character to offer real comfort, the particular warmth in how they say a name, the familiar cadence of how they laugh remaining, recognizable even when individual words are lost entirely. To imagine the resilience of this recognition picture, trying to identify a close friend's handwriting from only a few disconnected letters, and somehow still succeeding because the underlying pattern is familiar enough to be recognized from even incomplete information. Voice recognition across distance often works in a remarkably similar way. You have likely experienced this yourself, feeling genuinely comforted by a loved one's voice on a poor connection even when half the conversation was lost to static. That comfort was real, drawn from deep familiarity, strong enough to survive even significant interference. A quiet testament to how thoroughly known and trusted that particular voice has become to you. Within clinical settings, nurses regularly encounter patients who are unable to clearly describe their own pain, whether due to age, illness, cognitive impairment, or simple exhaustion, and experienced nurses develop a remarkably precise ability to read pain indirectly through subtle shifts in breathing, guarded posture, restlessness, and small changes in facial tension that patients themselves may not even be consciously aware of displaying. This skill develops gradually across years of clinical experience built from repeated exposure to countless patients whose pain presented in slightly different, individually specific ways. Formal pain assessment tools exist to support this process, but experienced nurses often describe relying heavily on accumulated intuition as well, a felt sense that something is wrong before any measurable indicator has clearly confirmed it. To imagine the depth of this skill, consider a nurse caring for hundreds of patients across a career, each one adding a small piece to an increasingly refined internal library of what unspoken pain tends to look like across a wide range of different people and different conditions. This reading ability, quiet and rarely celebrated publicly, represents genuinely sophisticated expertise care, expressed not through words, but through careful patient observation. If you have ever sensed that someone you love was in pain before they said anything about it themselves, you were exercising a smaller version of this same devoted attentive skill, built from love rather than clinical training, but no less real or valuable for it. There is a particular kind of anticipation that sometimes arrives just before a friend shares good news, a subtle brightness in their voice on the phone, an unusual eagerness in how quickly they suggested meeting up, a barely contained energy in how they walk toward you. Often this excitement is sensed before a single detail of the actual news has been shared, gathered instead from small cumulative cues that suggest something has shifted in a positive direction. This kind of anticipatory reading depends on genuine familiarity with a person's typical baseline energy, allowing even small deviations from that baseline to register clearly as meaningful. A friend who is usually measured and calm, suddenly seeming unable to sit still, becomes a noticeable, readable signal, even before any actual announcement has occurred. This is one of the small pleasures of close friendship, sharing in someone's joy even before you know its exact shape, simply because their excitement has already begun to reach you, carried through tone and energy long before it arrives in words. You have likely experienced this yourself, sensing immediately that a friend was holding something wonderful, asking eagerly what happened before they had even finished sitting down. That anticipation is not impatience. It is a form of attentive love, a readiness to receive someone's joy the moment it begins to arrive, built from knowing them well enough to notice even the earliest, quietest signs of happiness beginning to surface. Siblings who grew up sharing a household often develop an unusually efficient form of emotional reading, built from years of close, near-constant proximity during some of the most formative years of development. A single glance exchanged across a family dinner table can carry an entire conversation's worth of meaning between siblings. An acknowledgement of shared frustration, a silent agreement to discuss something later, a wordless check on how the other is holding up during a difficult family moment. This efficiency develops because siblings typically share not only genetics, but also an enormous amount of overlapping context. The same family history, the same particular family dynamics, the same accumulated understanding of how their shared household tends to operate emotionally. This overlapping context allows for remarkably compressed communication, requiring far less explicit information than would be needed between two people without this shared background. To imagine the depth of this shorthand picture, an entire complicated family situation being fully acknowledged between two siblings, through nothing more than a single brief glance across a room, understood instantly and completely by both, without either one needing to explain anything further. If you share this kind of wordless understanding with a sibling, let yourself notice tonight how remarkable that fluency actually is, built not through deliberate effort, but through years of simply growing up together, absorbing the same worlds side by side until reading one another became less a skill than simply a natural, quiet extension of how you have always known each other. There is a particular quality to a smile that is doing extra work, covering discomfort or sadness, rather than expressing genuine ease. And people who know each other well often become quite skilled at recognizing this distinction, even when the covering smile is offered with real effort and genuine intention to reassure. Something about the timing feels slightly off, held a moment too long, or arriving a fraction too quickly after a difficult question, or missing the natural softness around the eyes that typically accompanies real warmth. This recognition draws on the same deep familiarity that allows people to notice any deviation from someone's usual expressive baseline, comparing what is currently being shown against a well-established internal memory of what genuine ease actually looks like on this particular person's face. Catching this distinction is not about distrust. It often reflects real care, a willingness to look closely enough to notice when someone might need gentle support rather than simple surface-level reassurance. You have likely sensed this yourself, recognizing a loved one's covering smile and responding with a quiet, gentle question, rather than accepting the smile at face value. That instinct, though rarely discussed directly, represents a genuinely valuable form of attentiveness, the willingness to notice what someone is not quite saying and to offer them gently the chance to say it anyway, if and when they are ready. Experienced teachers often develop a quiet, practiced sensitivity to which students in a classroom are struggling silently, noticing small signals, a slightly slower pace completing work, a subtle reluctance to raise a hand, an unusual quietness from someone, typically more engaged well before any student directly asks for help or support. This sensitivity develops gradually across years spent observing many different students, building an increasingly refined sense of what quiet struggle tends to look like across a wide range of individual personalities and coping styles. A student who has learned to mask difficulty behind a calm exterior may still be noticed by a teacher, attuned enough to catch the smaller, less obvious signals beneath that calm surface. This kind of attentive reading, offered quietly and without announcement, can make a meaningful difference in a student's experience, providing gentle encouragement or support before difficulty has had the chance to deepen further. To imagine the depth of practice behind this sensitivity, consider years spent within classrooms full of different young people, each one adding further nuance to an increasingly accurate internal sense of what quiet struggle actually looks like. If you have ever been the student, quietly noticed and gently encouraged before you asked for help, or if you have offered that same quiet noticing to someone else, you understand firsthand how meaningful this particular patient form of attentiveness can genuinely be. There is a particular deep sense of safety that develops around people whose facial expressions and tone consistently match the content of their words, a coherence that over time builds real trust because it suggests a person who is not hiding significant discrepancies between what they feel and what they say. Research on trust and nonverbal consistency has found that mismatches between words and expression, someone saying they are calm while their voice carries visible tension, tend to erode trust gradually, even when the mismatch is never explicitly named or discussed. Conversely, consistent alignment between words and expression tends to build a quiet, cumulative sense of reliability, allowing a relationship to develop real ease and safety over time. This is part of why certain people feel instantly comfortable to be around, not because of anything dramatic, but because their outward presentation reliably matches their inner state, offering nothing to second-guess or quietly worry about. You have likely felt this safety yourself around someone whose calm always seemed to be real calm, whose warmth always seemed to be real warmth, consistent enough that trust simply accumulated naturally over time without requiring any conscious effort. That sense of safety is not incidental. It reflects a genuinely accurate reading of real consistency, and it represents one of the quieter, more valuable gifts a person can offer, simply by remaining honestly, reliably themselves. Among the deepest forms of comfort two people can share is the particular ease of sitting together in complete silence, requiring nothing further to feel fully connected. Long friendships often arrive at this kind of comfortable quiet, a stage where presence alone carries enough warmth that conversation becomes optional rather than necessary. This kind of silence is read correctly as comfort rather than distance, only because of the deep trust and familiarity built across many years shared together. A newer relationship might interpret the same silence as awkward, but old friends recognize it instantly and accurately as something closer to rest. To imagine the depth of trust required for this kind of comfortable quiet, consider all the years of conversation that came before it, gradually establishing enough safety and familiarity that words eventually became less necessary, replaced by a simpler, steadier form of shared presence. This represents one of friendship's quietest, most underappreciated gifts, the ability to simply exist alongside someone without needing to perform conversation to justify the closeness being shared. If you have ever sat comfortably in silence with an old friend, feeling no pressure at all to fill the quiet, you have experienced this rare, hard-won form of trust firsthand. It is worth recognizing tonight as exactly what it is. One of the clearest, gentlest signs that real closeness has settled fully into place between two people. Affection rarely announces itself through grand, dramatic declarations in the course of ordinary daily life. More often, it lives quietly inside small, repeated gestures. A cup of coffee prepared exactly the way someone likes it, without being asked a particular way. Someone always makes room on the couch, a habit of checking in with a simple message at the same time each day. Learning to read these small gestures as genuine expressions of care is itself a quiet skill, one built gradually through sustained attention to a relationship's particular patterns. Someone unfamiliar with these patterns might overlook them entirely, missing the significance hidden inside such ordinary repetition. But someone who knows the relationship well recognizes these small consistencies immediately as exactly what they are: love expressed not through occasional grand gestures, but through steady, dependable repetition. To imagine the depth of meaning contained inside these small habits, consider how much intention it actually takes to remember consistently the small preferences and needs of another person, day after day, without ever needing to be reminded. That consistency is not accidental. It is chosen repeatedly, quietly by someone who cares enough to keep choosing it. If you have ever felt genuinely loved by nothing more dramatic than someone remembering how you take your tea you were reading, affection correctly, recognizing real care hidden inside the smallest, steadiest gestures a relationship can offer, there is a particular expression that crosses a child's face in the instant real danger has passed, a visible loosening, shoulders dropping, breath releasing, an expression parents often recognize instantly and with deep relief of their own. This shared moment of relief, read clearly on a child's face and felt immediately in response by a watching parent, represents one of the more powerful wordless exchanges that can occur between two people who care deeply for one another. The child does not need to say anything at all. Their face alone communicates the sudden release from fear, and the parent's own body often responds in kind tension, easing in near simultaneous reflection of what they have just witnessed. This kind of emotional mirroring, occurring almost instantly and entirely without words, reflects just how deeply intertwined a parent's emotional state can become with their child's, particularly during and immediately after moments of fear or danger. To imagine the depth of this connection, consider how completely a parent's own body can shift from tense alertness to sudden relief, based entirely on reading a single expression crossing their child's face. If you have ever experienced this moment yourself, watching relief finally settle over a child's face after a frightening moment passed, You know how immediate and complete that shared release can feel. Two bodies calming together, connected by nothing more than a single clearly read expression. There is a particular quality of sincerity that registers in someone's eyes well before their words have finished being spoken. A steadiness in gaze, an openness that is difficult to convincingly fake, offering an early signal about whether what is being said can be trusted. This early reading often happens quickly, sometimes before conscious analysis has even had the chance to evaluate the actual content of what is being communicated. A person's eyes, resistant as they are to full conscious control, tend to offer some of the most honest signals available, subtle enough that most people notice them only as a vague feeling of trust or unease, without being able to clearly explain the source of that feeling. This is part of why certain apologies feel genuine, while others, technically identical in wording, feel hollow. The difference living not in the words chosen, but in whatever quiet sincerity does or does not show through the eyes delivering them. You have likely trusted this instinct yourself, sensing real sincerity in someone's gaze before their explanation had even finished, and later finding that instinct confirmed. That early trust was not naive. It reflected a genuine, well-founded reading of subtle but real signals gathered quickly by a part of you that has spent an entire lifetime learning to recognize the particular steadiness that tends to accompany someone telling the truth. Within close friendships, a particular kind of quiet signal often develops over time. A subtle shift in tone, a specific phrase, or even just a certain look that both people understand means it is time to gently move away from a difficult topic without either person needing to explicitly say so. This shared signal represents a sophisticated form of emotional attunement built gradually through repeated experience navigating hard conversations together. Recognizing and honoring this signal requires real sensitivity, noticing the subtle cue and responding to it smoothly, without drawing further attention to the shift itself. Friends who have developed this kind of quiet fluency together often move through difficult conversations with a particular gracefulness, gently steering away from pain when needed, and gently returning to it later when the moment feels more ready. To imagine the trust required for this fluency, consider how many earlier conversations it likely took to establish this shared, unspoken understanding, each one adding a small piece to a growing mutual sensitivity about when support looks like staying present, and when it looks like offering a gentle way out. If you share this kind of quiet signal with someone close to you, appreciate tonight how much careful attention it took to build. It represents a particular hard-won kind of care. The ability to protect someone gently, without ever needing to name exactly what you are protecting them from. There is a particular quiet warmth that arrives when someone remembers a small detail about your life that you never expected them to hold on to, the name of a coworker you mentioned only once, a small worry you shared weeks earlier, a minor preference you casually referenced in passing. Being remembered this way often registers as a distinct and meaningful signal, evidence that someone was genuinely listening rather than simply waiting for their turn to speak. This kind of attentive memory requires real, sustained care, the willingness to hold on to small pieces of another person's life simply because that person matters. Reading this warmth correctly, recognizing it as genuine care rather than incidental memory, reflects an accurate understanding of what sustained attention actually communicates about how much someone values a relationship. You have likely experienced this warmth yourself, feeling unexpectedly moved when someone remembered a small detail you had nearly forgotten mentioning at all. That warmth was not an overreaction. It was an accurate reading of real, quiet devotion, offered not through grand gestures, but through the simple, patient act of remembering. If you have ever offered this same kind of remembering to someone else, holding on to their small details simply because they matter to you, you have offered them one of the gentlest, most enduring forms of care a relationship can hold. Caring for someone who cannot communicate verbally, whether due to illness, disability, or advanced age, often requires developing an especially refined form of reading, learning to interpret comfort and discomfort through subtle physical cues. Alone, restlessness, changes in breathing, small shifts in facial tension that might otherwise go unnoticed by someone less attentive. Caregivers who spend sustained time with a particular individual often develop a remarkably precise, individualized fluency, learning that specific patterns of movement in this particular person tend to signal specific needs, distinct from the general patterns any textbook might describe. This deeply personal reading ability develops slowly through patient, sustained attention, repeated across many days and nights, gradually building a form of understanding that outside observers, however well trained, often cannot fully replicate. To imagine the depth of devotion behind this skill, consider the sheer accumulated hours involved sitting quietly beside someone, watching closely, learning gradually to distinguish their particular signals of pain from their particular signals of peace. This kind of reading represents one of the quietest, most demanding forms of love a person can offer, another requiring patience without any promise of eventual words in return. If you have ever cared for someone in this way, learning their unspoken language simply because they mattered enough to learn it, you have offered a form of devotion that deserves far more recognition than it typically receives. There is a particular subtle shift that sometimes happens in another person's energy, simply from being near someone they trust. Shoulders lowering slightly, breathing slowing, a certain tightness in the face gradually easing. This softening often happens gradually and quietly enough that it might escape notice entirely, and yet people who pay close attention to those they love often catch it, clearly recognizing the shift as a genuine sign of safety and comfort taking hold. Noticing this softening requires a particular kind of patient attentiveness, watching not for dramatic change, but for small cumulative signs that someone is settling more fully into ease, simply because of your presence beside them. This kind of reading offers a quiet, meaningful form of reassurance, in return confirmation that your presence itself is doing something gentle and good for someone you care about, even without either of you needing to discuss it directly. You have likely witnessed this yourself, watching someone visibly relax simply by sitting down beside you after a difficult day, their tension easing gradually the longer they remained near you. That softening was real, and your noticing of it was an accurate, tender form of attention. If you have ever been the reason someone's shoulders finally dropped after a hard day, you offered them something valuable simply by being present, a quiet, wordless form of comfort that your steady company alone was able to provide. Friendships that unfold primarily through text messages, particularly across long distances, often develop a surprisingly refined ability to read tone and mood from written words alone, despite the significant limitations of a medium that lacks voice, face, and posture entirely. Over time, friends in this situation often learn each other's particular texting patterns closely enough to notice meaningful deviations. An unusually short reply from someone typically expressive, a longer than usual delay from someone, typically prompt punctuation that feels slightly different than their usual style. These small textual cues, though far more limited than in-person signals, still carry real, readable information for those attentive enough and familiar enough to notice them. This suggests that reading people while enriched by face and voice is not entirely dependent on either capable of adapting even to the narrow text-only channel many long-distance relationships must rely on. To imagine the depth of this adapted skill, consider learning an entire relationship's emotional language through nothing but typed words and occasional punctuation, gradually becoming fluent enough to sense worry or joy from something as small as an extra line break. If you maintain a friendship largely through text, and have ever sensed something was wrong from nothing more than an unusually short reply, trust that instinct. It reflects real, accumulated familiarity, proof that closeness can travel and adapt through even the narrowest available channel, as long as real attention continues traveling along with it. There is a particular quiet honor in being the person around whom someone else's guard visibly lowers shoulders, relaxing voice, softening the careful, composed version of themselves, gently setting itself aside in favor of something more genuine and unguarded. Noticing this shift, recognizing it as real trust rather than simple familiarity, reflects an accurate reading of something meaningful happening within a relationship. People tend to reserve their more guarded, composed presentation for situations involving uncertainty or unfamiliarity, and the gradual dropping of that guard signals a corresponding growth in safety and trust. This shift often happens so gradually that it might otherwise pass unnoticed, and yet paying attention to it offers real insight into how a relationship is deepening over time. You have likely experienced both sides of this exchange, noticing someone's guard lowering around you, and also feeling your own guard lower gradually around someone who had earned that particular kind of trust. That mutual softening represents one of the clearer, more meaningful signs that real closeness has developed between two people. If you have ever watched someone gradually become more themselves in your presence, less composed, more honest, more at ease, you witnessed something genuinely significant. That shift was trust expressed not through words, but through the quiet, visible relaxation of someone who no longer felt the need to guard themselves so carefully around you. Long-term partners often develop a precise, individualized fluency in reading each other's exhaustion, sensing it clearly in the particular quality of a sigh released while removing shoes at the end of a long day, well before any words have been exchanged about how that day actually went. This kind of reading draws on deep familiarity with a partner's typical range of sighs, distinguishing an ordinary relaxed exhale from one carrying real depletion underneath it. Over years, shared together, this recognition becomes remarkably precise, sometimes precise enough that a partner can accurately guess not only that the day was difficult, but roughly how difficult, based on subtle variations in tone and length that would likely go entirely unnoticed by anyone less familiar. This fluency allows for a particular kind of responsive care, offering quiet space rather than immediate questions, sensing correctly that words might need to wait until exhaustion has had a moment to settle first. To imagine the depth of this attunement, consider years of shared evenings, each one adding further nuance to an increasingly precise internal understanding of exactly what this particular person's tiredness sounds like. If you share this kind of fluency with a partner, sensing their exhaustion accurately before they say a single word about their day, you share something built patiently over time, a form of closeness expressed quietly through nothing more than the careful, attentive reading of a single familiar sigh. There is a particular, unmistakable warmth that arrives when you sense, without being told directly, that someone who loves you witnessed a genuinely proud moment of yours and felt that pride fully alongside you. This sensing often draws on subtle cues, a particular brightness in their expression, a specific quality of attention directed toward you in that moment, a warmth in their eyes that lingers slightly longer than usual. Reading this correctly, recognizing genuine pride rather than simple, polite acknowledgement, reflects deep familiarity with how this specific person's face and presence shift when they are genuinely moved by something you have done. This kind of recognition often arrives instantly and with real certainty, a feeling that requires no further confirmation, because the signal itself felt so unmistakably real. You have likely experienced this yourself, catching a loved one's expression at exactly the right moment, and knowing immediately and completely that their pride in you was genuine and deeply felt. That certainty was not assumption. It was an accurate reading of real emotional signals gathered instinctively from years of familiarity with exactly how this person's face looks when something moves them. If you have ever felt truly unmistakably seen and celebrated in a proud moment, trust that feeling fully. It was real, and it was offered to you quietly and completely by someone who loves you. Young children rely heavily on reading their parents' emotional state as a primary signal for whether their broader environment is safe, a phenomenon researchers refer to as social referencing, particularly evident in uncertain or unfamiliar situations. A child encountering something new, an unfamiliar dog, a loud noise, an unexpected stranger, will often look immediately toward a parent's face before deciding how to react themselves, using that parent's calm or alarm as a primary guide for interpreting the situation's actual level of danger. A parent's steady, composed expression in an uncertain moment can measurably ease a child's fear even before any verbal reassurance has been offered. This reveals something profound about how deeply a parent's own emotional regulation shapes a young child's developing sense of safety in the world. The child is not simply reacting to the event itself, but to the parent's visible response to that event, reading it closely and trusting it completely. To imagine the weight of this responsibility, consider how much steadiness a parent must sometimes summon internally, specifically because a small watchful face is looking to them for confirmation that everything remains safe. If you have ever calmed a frightened child simply by remaining visibly steady yourself, you offered them something profound. Proof, read accurately and trusted completely that the world in that particular moment remained entirely safe. There is a particular understated comfort found in shared routines. The same quiet cup of coffee prepared together each morning. The same familiar walk taken together in the evening. The same comfortable silence settling in during a favorite, recurring show. These routines, however small and ordinary they might appear from the outside, often carry real emotional weight for the people sharing them, offering a steady, dependable rhythm that quietly reinforces closeness over time. Reading comfort correctly within these repeated moments requires no dramatic event at all, simply the accumulated cumulative reassurance of consistency, offered and received again and again across countless ordinary days. This kind of reading, recognizing warmth inside repetition rather than requiring novelty to feel meaningful, reflects a mature, settled understanding of what real closeness often looks like in practice. It is rarely dramatic. It is steady, dependable, quietly present. You have likely felt this comfort yourself, recognizing real warmth inside an entirely ordinary, repeated routine, shared with someone you love. If you share a small, familiar routine like this with someone in your life, let yourself appreciate tonight how much quiet devotion actually lives inside its simple repetition. A steady, patient form of love that asks for nothing more than showing up again and again together. There is a particular kind of reassurance offered simply through steady, quiet presence, requiring no words at all to communicate its meaning clearly. A friend sitting quietly beside you during a difficult moment, present and unhurried, without offering advice or filling the silence unnecessarily, communicates something real and comforting, through nothing more than their willingness to remain. Reading this presence correctly, recognizing it as genuine care rather than simple passivity, reflects an accurate understanding of what support often actually looks like in its most valuable form. Not every difficult moment calls for words. Sometimes what is needed most is simply confirmation that someone is willing to stay close while something hard is being felt. This kind of quiet companionship, though undramatic, often leaves a deeper impression than more active forms of comfort, precisely because it asks nothing and offers everything. Patience without agenda, presence without expectation. You have likely experienced this yourself, feeling genuinely steadied simply by someone remaining nearby during a hard stretch of time without either of you needing to discuss what was actually happening. That steadiness was real comfort, correctly read and gratefully received. If you have ever offered this same quiet presence to someone else, simply staying close without needing to fix or explain anything, You offered them one of the gentlest, most enduring forms of care one person can give another. Among the clearest signals of genuine affection is the particular deliberate slowing that happens when someone chooses to fully listen, setting aside distraction, softening their pace, offering their full attention without any visible impatience to move on to something else. This slowing down is rarely announced directly, and yet it registers clearly and warmly to the person being listened to, an unmistakable signal that they matter enough to receive someone's undivided, unhurried attention. Reading this correctly, recognizing the specific value of someone choosing patience over efficiency in a given moment, reflects real sensitivity to what affection often actually looks like in practice. It rarely arrives as a grand declaration. More often it arrives quietly in the willingness to slow down, to stay a little longer, to let a conversation take exactly as long as it needs without rushing toward its conclusion. You have likely felt this warmth yourself, sensing genuine care in the way someone set aside their hurry simply to hear you out completely. That warmth was accurately drawn from a real and meaningful signal. If you have ever offered someone this same unhurried attention, slowing your own pace simply to listen more fully, you offered them a quiet but genuinely significant form of affection, the simple, patient gift of being fully, unhurriedly heard. Within close, trusted relationships, hesitation before speaking is often correctly read as evidence of care rather than distance, a sign that someone is thinking carefully about how to say something difficult precisely because they care enough about the relationship to choose their words with real thoughtfulness. This kind of reading depends heavily on established trust, allowing a pause to be interpreted generously rather than anxiously. In newer or less secure relationships, a similar hesitation might be misread as reluctance or withdrawal, but within a well-established bond, that same silence is often understood correctly as evidence of thoughtful care rather than any kind of emotional distance. This distinction matters considerably, shaping whether a pause feels reassuring or unsettling, depending entirely on the trust already present within the relationship itself. You have likely experienced this generous reading yourself, sensing that a loved one's hesitation before a difficult conversation reflected careful consideration rather than any lack of feeling. That generous interpretation, offered instinctively within a trusted bond, reflects real emotional maturity, the ability to sit with uncertainty briefly, without immediately assuming the worst. If you have ever extended this kind of patient, trusting interpretation to someone you love, allowing their hesitation room to simply be care, taking its time, you offered your relationship one of its quieter, more valuable forms of grace. There is a particular unmistakable feeling that arrives when you notice someone's face visibly relax, the moment they see you approaching tension, easing, a genuine smile forming naturally rather than being consciously arranged. This small, immediate shift often communicates belonging more clearly than any spoken welcome could manage. An instinctive, visible confirmation that your presence itself brings comfort and ease to someone who matters to you. Reading this shift correctly, recognizing it as a genuine sign of belonging rather than simple politeness, reflects real familiarity with how this particular person's face tends to change, specifically in your presence, distinct from how it might change around others less close to them. This kind of recognition often arrives instantly, requiring no conscious analysis at all. Simply an immediate, warm certainty that your arrival was genuinely welcome. You have likely experienced this yourself, watching someone's face soften the moment they spotted you, and feeling instantly and completely a quiet sense of belonging in response. That feeling was accurate, drawn from a real and meaningful signal rather than mere hope or imagination. If you have ever offered this same visible relaxation to someone else, your own face softening naturally, the moment they arrived, you offered them the same quiet, powerful confirmation that their presence in your life is genuinely, unmistakably welcome. Within deeply trusted relationships, a single quiet nod can sometimes carry as much meaning as an entire spoken conversation, communicating understanding, agreement, or reassurance instantly and completely, without requiring any further elaboration at all. This kind of compressed communication develops only after considerable shared history, enough accumulated context, that a small gesture can reliably stand in for what might otherwise require many sentences to fully express. A single nod exchanged during a difficult family gathering might mean an entire shared understanding about how to navigate the moment together. A single nod exchanged after difficult news might communicate complete wordless support more powerfully than any spoken sentence could manage in that instant. Reading this kind of compressed signal accurately requires deep familiarity, built patiently over considerable shared history, allowing meaning to travel efficiently through gesture alone. You have likely experienced this yourself, receiving an entire wave of reassurance from nothing more than a single quiet nod from someone whose trust and understanding you knew completely. That reassurance was real, and your reading of it was accurate, drawn from years of accumulated closeness, compressed efficiently into a single, small gesture. If you share this kind of wordless fluency with someone in your life, appreciate tonight how much trust and shared history it actually represents, condensed quietly into something as simple as a single understanding nod. There is a particular deep sense of safety carried in the sound of a familiar voice, welcoming you home, a warmth in tone that communicates comfort and belonging, almost instantly, often before any specific words have even been fully processed. This recognition draws on deep accumulated familiarity with exactly how safety and welcome sound when expressed by this particular person, a tone distinct and recognizable from any other voice you might encounter throughout your day. Hearing this familiar welcome tends to produce an immediate physical sense of ease, shoulders relaxing, breath slowing, a full body recognition that a safe, familiar space has finally been reached. This kind of reading, accurate and deeply comforting, reflects just how thoroughly the body learns to associate particular voices with particular feelings of safety, built patiently across countless repeated homecomings over time. You have likely experienced this yourself, feeling an immediate wave of relief and ease the moment a familiar voice welcomed you home after a long or difficult day. That relief was real, an accurate reading of genuine safety communicated instantly through nothing more than a familiar tone. If your own voice has ever offered this same welcome to someone returning home to you, you offered them something profound, a small familiar sound that told their whole body instantly and completely that they had finally arrived somewhere safe. Across every fact shared so far, one truth has remained quietly constant. Reading people is not a rare or specialized talent reserved for professionals and researchers alone. It is something you have been practicing your entire life, in ordinary rooms, with ordinary people, through countless small attentive moments you likely never thought to name or count. Every time you sensed a friend's hidden sadness, noticed a loved one's genuine pride, or felt safety in a familiar voice, you were exercising a skill built patiently across your whole life, layered gently through every relationship you have ever cared enough to pay attention to. This skill does not require perfection. It only requires the kind of steady, patient attention you have likely been offering quietly and without much recognition for as long as you can remember. Tonight, let yourself recognize this gift fully, not as something you must still work toward, but as something you already genuinely possess. You have spent a lifetime learning the particular language of the people you love, their silences, their small gestures, their particular quality of laughter and calm. That fluency is real, and it is yours, built patiently through nothing more extraordinary than caring enough to keep noticing, again and again, one quiet, attentive moment at a time. All this time the story has moved outward, toward faces, across rooms, toward voices on phones, toward the people you love, and the small signals you have learned to read in them so faithfully. For this last stretch, let the attention turn gently inward toward you. Right now, in whatever quiet space you are resting in, your own eyes carry information too, a particular heaviness settling into the lids, a slower blink than the one you had an hour ago. No one else needs to read this signal tonight. You can simply notice it yourself gently, without needing to interpret it as anything more complicated than what it actually is. Your body has been offering you information all day, the same way it offers information to everyone who has ever looked closely at you with love. Tonight that information is simple. Your eyes are tired, and tiredness, read correctly, is not a problem to be solved. It is a signal to be honored. You have spent this entire story learning how carefully humans read each other, how much attention it takes to notice comfort, safety, and warmth in another person's smallest gestures. That same careful attention is available to you now, turned toward yourself for once, instead of outward. Let your eyes be heavy. Let that heaviness be read simply, gently, as exactly what it is, a quiet, honest signal that rest is close, and that it is safe now to let it come. Somewhere beneath everything else happening in your body right now, your heartbeat has likely already begun to slow, gradually, gently, the natural rhythm of a body settling toward rest. This is not something you need to consciously produce. It is simply happening the same reliable way it happens every night, a quiet biological signal that requires no effort from you at all, beyond simply allowing it. If you were reading someone else's body right now, watching them settle into evening stillness, you might notice this same slowing and recognize it instantly as a sign of ease. Tonight, that same signal belongs to you, and it deserves the same gentle recognition. There is no need to monitor it closely or measure it against anything. It is simply your body doing what bodies naturally do at the end of a long day, gradually loosening its grip on alertness, allowing something slower and softer to take its place. You have spent this whole story learning to trust small, honest signals in the people you love. Let yourself extend that same trust inward now, toward your own slowing heartbeat, toward whatever quiet easing is already beginning to happen inside you. It does not need your permission to continue. It only needs your willingness to stop resisting it, to let this one small, reliable rhythm carry you gently a little further toward rest. Earlier in this story, you learned that a person's shoulders often reveal tension or ease, long before their words do. A silent, reliable signal read by anyone paying close attention. Take a moment now to notice your own shoulders wherever you are resting. There is a good chance they have already begun to drop slightly, loosening in small, quiet increments you may not have consciously registered until now. This softening is not something you need to force. It tends to happen naturally the longer a body remains still and safe, gradually releasing whatever tension the day had gathered inside it. If someone who loved you were sitting nearby right now, watching closely, they would likely read this softening exactly the way you have learned to read it in others throughout this story, as a clear, honest sign of comfort, of safety, of a body finally allowing itself to rest. You do not need anyone else present to receive that same gentle reading tonight. You can offer it to yourself, noticing your own shoulders easing, and trusting that easing simply for what it is. No interpretation is required beyond the obvious one. Your body feels safe enough right now to let go of what it was holding earlier. Let that softening continue unhurried, exactly as far as it wants to go tonight, trusted quietly by the one person who is here to notice it clearly. Breath was one of the very first signals mentioned in this story. A quiet, honest indicator of a person's emotional state, often shifting long before words catch up to explain what is happening underneath them. Right now, without needing to force anything, notice your own breath wherever it currently is, whatever pace it has settled into. There is likely a gentle slowing already underway. Breath lengthening slightly, exhales growing a little longer than they were earlier this evening. This is not something requiring effort. It is simply what breath tends to do, gradually, reliably, whenever a body begins moving toward rest. If you had been reading someone else's breath this closely throughout this story, you would have recognized this exact pattern as a clear, trustworthy sign of ease settling in. Tonight, let that same recognition apply gently to yourself. Your breath does not need managing or correcting. It only needs noticing, followed by permission to continue exactly as it already wants to, slow and steady, unhurried by anything except the natural pull toward rest that has likely been building quietly within you this entire evening. Let each exhale arrive a little longer than the one before it, without needing to count them or track them closely. Simply let your breath continue its own honest, reliable signal, trusted the same way you have learned throughout this story to trust honest signals in everyone else you love. Throughout this story, stillness has appeared again and again as something meaningful, comfortable, silence between old friends, a peaceful room settled after tension has passed, a quiet presence, offering more comfort than words ever could. Tonight, whatever stillness has begun settling over you carries that same quiet meaning. It is not empty. It is not something to fill or interrupt. It is communication in its own gentle way. Your body telling you clearly that it is ready to rest, that the day's demands have finally been set down, at least for now. If someone who loved you was sitting quietly nearby, watching this stillness settle over you, they would likely recognize it exactly as you have learned to recognize stillness throughout this story. Not as distance, not as something wrong, but as ease finally fully arriving. You do not need to interpret this stillness further tonight. You only need to let it continue, trusting it the same generous way you have learned to trust comfortable silence in every close relationship this story has described. There is nothing left to read into it beyond what is already plainly, gently true. You are settling. You are becoming still. And that stillness, quiet as it is saying something entirely worth listening to. That rest, patient and steady, has finally arrived close enough to receive. Earlier, this story described how a genuine smile involves muscles that resist conscious control, offering an honest signal that cannot easily be faked. A yawn carries that same kind of honesty. It is not something most people can convincingly perform on command, and when it arrives, naturally, it communicates something true and simple about the body's readiness for rest. If a yawn has visited you at any point this evening, or visits you now, let it be read the same generous way you have learned throughout this story to read every honest, involuntary signal in the people you love. It is not rudeness. It is not something to suppress or apologize for. It is simply your body speaking plainly the same reliable way it has been speaking all evening, through slowing breath and softening shoulders. There is something almost tender about a yawn, an entirely unguarded moment where the body says clearly what it needs, without any performance or pretense involved at all. You have spent this whole story learning to appreciate honest signals, wherever they appeared, in a stranger's genuine smile, in a child's cry, in a friend's unmistakable exhaustion. Let a yawn tonight receive that same warm appreciation, recognized simply and gently as exactly what it is. One more small, honest piece of evidence that rest has arrived and that it is entirely welcome. Throughout this story, you learned how consistently the body communicates care toward others. A hand resting gently on a shoulder, a posture leaning warmly toward someone loved, a face softening the moment someone trusted walks through the door. Tonight, your body is offering that same kind of care directed quietly inward toward you. Every small signal gathering this evening, slowing breath, softening shoulders, heavier eyes, is your body caring for you, the exact same way it might care for someone else you love, patiently, honestly, without needing to be asked. You do not need to summon rest through effort. Your body has already begun offering it gently the same reliable way it has been offering signals all through this story, faithfully, without complaint, without needing recognition in return. Let yourself receive this care tonight, the same generous way you have learned to receive care from the people closest to you. Throughout this entire story, trusting it simply because it is honest and because it has arrived exactly when it was needed. Your body has spent this whole evening quietly preparing you for rest, one small signal at a time. That preparation deserves to be trusted now, gently and completely, the same way every honest signal in this story has deserved your trust, offered patiently and received finally with nothing more required than your quiet willingness to let it in. Earlier, this story described the particular comfort of sitting in silence with someone you trust completely. A quiet that requires no filling, no explanation, no anxious interpretation. Whatever quiet has settled around you now deserves that same generous reading. It is not empty. It is not something gone wrong. It is comfortable, familiar, safe, the exact same quality of stillness that old friends recognize instantly in each other after years of shared trust. Tonight, you can offer yourself that same trust, letting this quiet simply exist without needing to fill it with anything further. There is nothing more required of you right now than to remain gently present within it, the same unhurried way close friends remain present with one another during their most comfortable wordless moments together. This quiet is not asking anything of you. It is simply here, patient and steady, offering exactly the same kind of comfort you have learned throughout this story to recognize and trust in your closest relationships. Let it hold you the way that kind of quiet has always been meant to hold someone gently, without pressure, without needing to be understood any further than it already simply is. You are safe inside it. You have been safe inside it this entire time. Throughout this story, you learned how much meaning small, honest gestures can carry: a raised eyebrow, a gentle nod, a soft look exchanged between people who trust each other completely. Closing your eyes tonight belongs to that same quiet category. It requires no elaborate meaning. It is simply an honest expression of readiness, your body's own small, clear signal that today has been fully lived and that rest has rightfully earned its turn now. There is nothing left to prove tonight, nothing further this story needs from you except your own quiet willingness to let your eyes close gently whenever they are ready. You have spent this entire evening learning how much can be communicated without words, and closing your eyes tonight continues that same wordless language, simple, honest, complete. Let it happen exactly as gently as it wants to, without effort, without resistance. Trusted the same generous way you have learned throughout this story, to trust every honest signal offered by the people and the moments you have cared about. This is yours now, this small, quiet closing, and it deserves exactly the same warmth you have offered so freely to everyone else within this story. Across this entire story, you learned again and again how much attention it takes to read someone well, how much patience, how much accumulated care. You have likely spent years offering exactly that kind of attention to the people around you, noticing their tiredness, their pride, their quiet unspoken needs, long before they ever had to ask. Tonight, that same gentle attention belongs to you. You do not need to earn it further. You have already, simply by living through this ordinary tender day, deserved the same soft reading you so easily extend to everyone else in your life. Let yourself be read kindly tonight, by no one else but yourself, noticing your own tiredness, the way you would notice it in someone you love, and responding to it the same way, with patience, with warmth, with permission to finally rest. This story is ending now, but the quiet care running through it does not have to end with it. Carry it gently into sleep, the same steady care you have offered so faithfully to others, finally tonight, turned all the way home toward you. Thank you for spending this time here with me. Until next time, good night.